web interface.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
The largest union talk radio program in the South. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller. If you have anything to add, you can give us a call. Let's go ahead and open up those phone lines. That is 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. We appreciate everybody tuning in. Looking forward. We got a lot to talk about today. We're going to jump right into it. Social Security is turning 90 years old. Social Security is turning 90 years old, and, you know, Social Security has been such a benefit for the people of this country, and it really goes, underappreciated. Something like it has decreased the elder poverty rate in this country by something like 30%. The administrative costs for Social Security are something like 1%, where similar private, insurance sort of programs, the administrative costs are more like 10 to 20%. It's such an efficient organization, and it is, it's such a good thing, and it has kept so many people out of poverty. One of the best things that the U.S. government has ever done, constantly under attack by people on the right, by bosses, politicians. And when I say people on the right, I mean Democrats and Republicans. Obama famously tried to cut Social Security, but Republicans wouldn't take yes for an answer, fortunately for us. And so, constantly under attack, but it's still around for 90 years now. Really, really such a great program. The AFL-CIO, the largest labor federation in the country, put out a statement celebrating the 90th anniversary of Social Security and pointed to some of the things that the Trump administration is doing to endanger the program. Here is a exhaustive list of things that the Trump administration is doing to endanger Social Security. They have proposed changes that would have ended telephone support services, as well as forced people to verify their identity in person instead of by phone, endangering millions of Americans' ability to access their hard-earned benefits, especially people with disabilities, seniors, and those in rural communities. Wait times have skyrocketed since Trump came into office, with callers spending more than 3 hours on hold with limited callback options, blocking people from getting answers to their questions or applying for benefits by phone. Phone delays have driven exponential growth in foot traffic at already understaffed offices, leading to processing backlogs and lost claims. DOGE-driven policies are causing the agency to shed experienced IT experts who maintain and upgrade critical agency systems, creating increased risk for payment errors and system instability, including 5 outages in a single month. That is not normal, folks. And scammers are now exploiting the Doge-driven chaos, targeting vulnerable seniors with fake emails demanding identity verification, while phone delays may prevent many from reaching the agency to verify if the messages are legitimate. Really concerning stuff here from the Trump administration with respect to Social Security. Here's another thing about that's going on right now with Social Security. The One Big Beautiful Bill put something in place called a Trump account for babies, which in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. You know, I mean, one of the things that that Cory Booker was proposing during the 2020 Democratic primary was baby bonds. Invest money for children whenever they're born, so that they get like a $50,000 check when they turn 18 that they can use on either college or their first home purchase or something like that, or training. And so the Trump administration has proposed something similar, but like orders of magnitude smaller. And so the Trump accounts would put $1,000 one time into a tax-advantaged savings account, like a retirement account, that cannot be accessed until the baby turns 18. But it's a retirement account, so even though they could pull it out at 18, they would face the similar penalties as you would taking anything out of any other retirement account before you turn like 60 or 65 or whatever it is. And so it's kind of a strange thing, but you know, for every baby born within this One Big Beautiful Bill, every baby born between like January of 26 and December of 28 is going to get $1,000 put in an account, and then people in this baby's life can put more money into that account as they grow older, and then they can start taking money out of it when they turn 18 if they want, but they'll still face a penalty for it because it would be before they retire. And so the Treasury Secretary, what's his name? Scott Bessent, is talking about this at a Breitbart, talking about this new policy that was within the One Big Beautiful Bill at a Breitbart, some sort of Breitbart thing, some sort of Breitbart event. And you may be wondering how I'm connecting this Trump account, how I went immediately from the Trump account immediately from Social Security to the Trump account. And that is a progression that Scott Bessent took. Let's listen to him at Breitbart.
We want you to understand it. We want, it's almost like, if you get a pet, you understand everything about your pet. So if you have these accounts, why are you investing it this way? How are you doing it? How can you understand the power of compound interest? And also at the end of the day, that I'm not sure when the distribution level date should be. Should it be 30 and you can buy a house? Should it be 60? But in a way, it is a backdoor for privatizing Social Security. Like Social Security is a defined benefit plan paid out that, to the extent that if all of a sudden these accounts grow and you have in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for your retirement, then that's a game changer too.
So there you go. A backdoor to privatizing Social Security. And this is something, again, that they want to do all the time. And just to make it explicit, privatizing Social Security would be bad. It would be very bad for people. For one, the way that Social Security is set up is basically a direct cash transfer from people who are working today to people who are retired. And so being able to, having that direct cash transfer is really important for the stability of everything. And if you instead set it up as individual saving accounts that is tied to the market, then you are tying a person's ability to, it's the whole thing going that we've done in the private retirement sector when we transferred from pensions being one of the big things in the retirement sector to 401ks, which has been a disaster for workers. 401ks have just basically been a huge scam on working people in the United States because we have tied our retirement to the fluctuations and the instability of the market. We're also, just giving all of this money for like rich people to play with instead of, doing things a little bit more responsibly. And so just think about that. If you are a worker, you would obviously prefer a pension to a 401k. So you would obviously prefer Social Security as it exists to a potential privatized version. And so the kind of logic here that they're wanting to go down is, basically kind of creating a culture of individual retirement investing with these Trump accounts rather than and incentivizing that rather than, encouraging people to think about how to stabilize Social Security into the future. Really, really bad stuff. And it's not going to be good. Not going to be good for anybody. What are some other, Adam, are there any other things about Social Security that you think that folks ought to know about?
Yeah, there were a couple things I wanted to mention that I think are relevant. Without Social Security, 22 million more adults and children would be below the poverty line. That's from CBPP using the March 2024 numbers. And obviously, most of those folks are age 65 or older, 4 out of 5 of those beneficiaries. But there's over 5 million who are under the age of 65 who are kept out of poverty by Social Security, including nearly 1 million children. A lot of folks think about Social Security as something for older adults in retirement, but about 20% of the beneficiaries receive Social Security disability insurance, or they were young survivors of deceased workers. Right. And every week on this show, we talk about workers who were killed on the job, right? People who lost their lives way earlier than 65 and often have young children at home. And Social Security is a really important benefit there as well. And we talked last week with a sister who works at Social Security who talked about how even prior to the Trump administration taking power, they were at their lowest staffing levels in 50 years, I believe it was, which is just remarkable considering how much the population has grown, how many more people they're having to talk to and to service, and to think that they have the lowest in 50 years. So, this is a problem that has been building for decades at this point. You mentioned that, in some cases it's been bipartisan. But now we're in a really, really scary time where these impacts of the current administration are already making it so much harder. And then you have folks like this joker openly talking about privatization. It's really bad news. It's bad for all of us. Everyone, no matter how old you are, how young you are, this is important to all of us. We have to defend Social Security.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully, folks are letting their representatives know that they don't appreciate the Trump administration openly talking. And that's the funny thing about a back door is that typically, you don't announce that you're walking through the back door. Like that's kind of the purpose of a back door is that it's a little bit more secretive. And so, hopefully people are letting their representatives know that they don't appreciate the Trump administration advertising that they want to walk through the back door of privatizing Social Security and taking money away from people when they retire. I mean, it's just totally
yeah. I mean, and I think
funny thing to say out loud.
And the other thing is that about 79% of Americans oppose cuts to this program, right? So any kind of privatization is a cut. We should understand that. We should also understand that the way it's been sabotaged through understaffing, through some of the attacks of DOJ and the current administration, what benefits that are denied or delayed are benefits that are ultimately denied. And so we already have folks who are losing benefits already, folks who are being not just inconvenienced, but really losing very, very critical benefits. So it's a big problem that we're facing. And, people sometimes don't realize how modest these Social Security benefits are. It's, on average about $1,800 a month. So it's not like people are living luxuriously on these Social Security benefits, but for the vast majority of people, it is their primary means of retiring. And, we've already seen trends of more and more older workers who are working well past typical retirement age because they have no choice, right? They can't even scrounge up a living just on Social Security alone. And as you mentioned, the decline of pensions, very, very few workers these days have a solid, guaranteed retirement pension they can count on. And, I run into a lot of workers who are middle-aged who have already had to cash out, one or two 401ks by this point in their life, by the time they're in their 40s and 50s, because of losing their job, because of disasters at their home and having to access cash to repair it, any number of things. And so the lack of guaranteed benefits is something that troubles all of us and threatens all of us.
Right. We're coming up on our union profile segment. We try to do a union profile every week, a smaller, typically a local union in the South. We try to highlight. This week we have Jordan Easley on. He is an organizing director for the International Chemical Workers Union Council of the UFCW. The UFCW is the United Food and Commercial Workers. Jordan Easley, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir. You sound great.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate it. And before we dive into what's been going on in Alabama, let's just start with you. If you could give us a little bit of background, what got you into the labor movement? What led you into the International Chemical Workers?
Awesome. Well, I hail from the great city of Detroit, Michigan. A very pro-labor state, pro-labor city, but pro-labor state as well. I'm from a family of auto workers, boilermakers, engineers, and stuff. So it's been streaming through my veins for quite some time. And how we pay it forward is based on the past, present, how we can pour it to the future and stuff. So I am fortunate to be part of a labor world in which we pour into educating and mobilizing the masses on an everyday basis and stuff. So just want to give a shout out to the great city of Detroit, Michigan in that regard, because it's how we keep our city going. It's how we get, production is always production in our lay of the land.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's cool to have that background with the auto worker legacy of organizing in Detroit. So tell us a little bit about the International Chemical Workers Union. I'll be honest, it was not a union I was very familiar with before,
Sure.
I got to talking to you and finding out about this campaign in Alabama. So, who's ICUC? International
ICWC.
Chemical Workers Union Council. Yeah, see, it's a mouthful. So tell us a little bit about
Right.
that.
Well, I before I get into that, when I teach labor studies courses, or instruct labor studies courses on behalf of the University of Michigan Community Center of Labor Studies. I always say LMNOP because there's a lot of acronyms in that regard. But we are the intermediate charter body of the UFCW, United Food and Commercials Worker, which is the largest private sector union in the U.S. I want to give a special shout out to my president, Lance Heasley, with the H, and also newly elected President Milton Jones, who are spearheading these efforts to bring great value for workers to use their voice and exercise their right to use their voice, because time is worth more than money. And what I mean by that is conversations matter now more than ever, because there's a lot of money thrown at us to as a way of attack, right? So you name it. Just agriculture, microelectronics, hydrocarbons, gas, you name it, everything that can be from what you can weaponize as opposed to what you put in your Kool-Aid. So chemicals are in everything. I'm sure you guys know that.
Great. So let's talk about Gaylord Chemical in Tuscaloosa. Tell us a little bit about, that entity down there. What kind of jobs do they do? And what led them to reach out to y'all and to organize?
Absolutely. The ones that were unionized were the production department, which consists of operations, multi-craft technicians, which are the maintenance and repairs, and then also the finishing technicians, which were part of the final stages of a product that is created. And so they focus on the pharmaceuticals, agriculture, microelectronics, and so everything that makes the company what it is, and that way they can spearhead that and move that into multiple states and set up shop in that fashion.
Yeah, and y'all won a big victory back in January. So can you
Yes,
tell
sir.
us a little about this victory and what's been happening since the election?
Well, the victory is very significant, especially how hard it is to organize in the South, right? Let alone in Tinseltown in that regard, which hails one of the most expensive and more special colleges in the world, in University of Alabama. So
That's right.
yes. And so I say that to say that you have to map out every nook and cranny of what it takes to organize and how to keep the conversation going. But everybody knows University of Alabama, whether it's with sports, whether it's with just that Tinseltown narrative. And we were able to do some great work in regards to it. These workers were very special in regards to wanting what's best for each other. They were very close knit, and when it comes to the organizing, they all realized they all had each other in that regard. And I think that's why I reflect the 84% of the victory that did occur. And that was a special moment that's forever stamped. And it also aligns with the town narrative and stuff like that too, because it did make local news in that regard. So the recognition letter, I'm sure that most people don't know what that is, but by law, we have to submit a recognition letter just in case the employer happens to have a change of heart right at that moment to accept the fact that, or recognize the union, right? 99.9% of the time that doesn't happen. So we don't bank on that, but by law, we have to submit that. And each person that voted yes did sign a recognition letter. And not just signed, they signed, dated, and printed their name too. So
Wow.
it was right. So every single person that voted yes did that because they saw themselves in the vision that we painted, but it's their vision too. So it will forever be stamped as a beautiful thing. It's just a matter of how we can pour into what's the next steps, and also never forget that what they did was very pivotal in the labor movement, also in the South.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how has Gaylord Chemical, how's the company been taking this ever since?
Well, not so good at all. It really happened under their nails, right? There wasn't able to be any union busting going on, which naturally goes on throughout most union campaigns. And so these individuals, along with myself, with just being a fly on the wall, because obviously the union starts with you. The first three letters of the word union is you and I, correct? So this is the workers' win, right? And we were able to skate under the nails, and because of that, they've been running a very aggressive boss campaign because of it. They didn't have a hand in it. They didn't have any knowledge of what was going on, and they're not too happy.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something that we experience so much here in the South. We just had a tough loss in Huntsville last week at the Navistar campaign with the UAW, and it's just not it's not uncommon that these companies fight back, and it's really difficult sometimes in the South because of that. And you mentioned earlier those relationships that they have with each other, and that seems to me to be the most important thing to withstand those kind of attacks, is to have each other's back, to maintain that solidarity and just that collective spirit of looking out for one another. So I wanted to just ask, what's next for Local 191T? As you said, you've been dealing with some retaliation from the company. They're not happy. So what are some of the next steps? And more importantly, for our listeners, is there anything that we can do to support these workers as they try to fight for a first contract?
Absolutely. I think we have to understand that it's something that is not expected when it comes to the percentage, but we also have to pour into the fact that that percentage did happen. So at one point, everybody was on board to a point where people were willing to put their, not only their John Hancock, but print and sign a date of that support, right? And I think through all unions, given this new administration, who are piercing through labor on an everyday basis in every which way. And I will say, before I was next, I did hear about how they're piercing through the health and safety, and that's what they did through us. We need to start leaning on each other. Find that technical support. Many hands do make light work, right? So we have a lot of community interest groups. We have Jobs That Move America. We have the North Labor Council. Adam, I know you're part of Alabama Rise, and I think within these next few years, this new administration isn't playing around. We can point fingers or we can do something about it. And I think hearts and minds will always triumph a monetary value, because at the end of the day, we could go into what Tinseltown leans on, right? And we, as a whole, all of us, including you, including this whole country, we won that win, and that was because of hearts and minds. It was because of great organizing and maybe prolific organizing in that sense. But we all have it in us, and so we have to pour into the boots on the ground that are currently there. Lean on that understanding, and I think the results will speak for themselves. I mean, it sounds simple. I know there's a lot of moving parts, but the new administration is, they're moving parts too, right? And so if we stop thinking about the monetary value or how we can really, go dollar for dollar, because I think we'll lose every day in that regard, and realize that people just need a conversation, I think some numbers will be popping out or populating in a way that we'll never see before. That's something that I can personally say triumph that 84% in what happens to be one of the richest colleges in the country, in Tinseltown, in Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
That's right. That's right. Well, yeah, I really I appreciate that, because I think the conversations, the one-on-one conversations that we have with each other, with our coworkers, with our neighbors, community members, that's how we move the needle. That's how we build collective action, and that's how we build a mass movement that can really stand up for working people. And Jordan, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate all the hard work, and we're sending all of our love and solidarity down to Tuscaloosa with these workers.
Absolutely, absolutely. A lot of work to go. I think that it's a calling out to all unions to say, hey, there's a lot of boots on the ground, and there are, there are optics and logistics where, we pass things on to the rep and stuff, but what's on the ground, the revolving inoculation is what I call it. I think we can really bloviate the revolving inoculation. I look forward to seeing other unions do so, and that way, narratives that are going on with UAW or whatever union, I think we need to start leaning on our support. It's all there, right? And the new administration is not playing around. They're piercing through single departments, challenging these departments, and seeing really just stacking work on one individual as opposed to pouring into these interest groups and stuff. But that's the thing. Many hands make light work, and I look forward to us doing that because we have a few more years of this narrative, and we might as well come together and put our differences to the side.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jordan.
Jordan Easley, Organizing Director for the International Chemical Workers Union Council of the UFCW. Thank you for your time. We're going to take a break. Yep, absolutely. We're going to take a break here for just a minute, play a couple of ads, and then we're going to be right back with Last Week in Southern Labor. We're also going to be talking to folks at the Union for Rocket Scientists, the NASA, the biggest union at NASA, IFPTE, going to be talking about how they are fighting back and trying to preserve the agency. Lots of good stuff coming up. Stay tuned.
This is the Rocket City.
That's right.
We know we got NASA folks listening, so tune in.
That's right. Appreciate everybody tuning in. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Tennessee to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller. Today on the program, we just finished a conversation with organizing director for the International Chemical Workers Union Council of the UFCW about a union campaign they've got in Tuscaloosa. We are going to be talking to some folks who represent IFPTE, the largest union at NASA. And we're going to be doing more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number and the line is open. You can call 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. If you'd like to give us a call, we would like to hear from you. You can also leave us a voicemail throughout the week at any time. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, tvlr.fm, but we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, so if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or just make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. We've got a bunch of cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. And finally, if you're a member of a union, then think about getting your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that.
Hey y'all, let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. And we want to welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, Means TV, or through your favorite podcast app. And we are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. As most of you know, we are not media professionals, just a few diehard union brothers who want to amplify the voices of the working class here in the American South. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener. We appreciate you spending some time with us today. Big show today. Looking forward to it.
That's right. Let's jump right into last week in Southern labor. This is a segment that we do every week where we take a look at what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to. Here's what they were up to from August 8th to the 15th in new union campaigns. 5 workers at Hillside Rehab and Healthcare Center filed a petition to hold a union election with the Service Employees International Union, SEIU Healthcare Missouri, Kansas, that is located in Missouri. 34 workers at Waste Connections in Richwood, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters, Local 610. 62 workers at New Fortress Energy in San Juan, Puerto Rico, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Steelworkers, UFCW. 14 workers at Custom Fabrication in Philpott, Kentucky, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Central Midwest Regional Council of Carpenters. 55 workers at QSL and AmeriForce Management Services in New Orleans, Louisiana, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Longshoremen's Association, ILA. 36 workers at GM Culinary in Austin, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with Unite Here, Local 23. In union election results, 69 workers at People's Transit in Atlanta, Georgia, voted 11-3 in favor of unionization with the Amalgamated Transit Union, ATU Local 732. In a statement commending the workers for their victory, the union highlighted poor pay, weak benefits, and concerns about the safety of the vehicles that transport people with disabilities and seniors as issues that they will be looking to address in their first contract. 360 workers at Pratt & Whitney Engine Services in Bridgeport, West Virginia, voted 121-222 against unionization with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW. 5 workers at Marmac Fire and Safety in Gulfport, Mississippi, voted 0-5 against unionization with the United Association of Plumbers and Pipefitters, the UA's Road Sprinkler Fitter, Local 669. 80 workers at Magic City Casino in Miami, Florida, voted in a decertification election 32-46 against maintaining unionization with Unite Here, Local 355. The union has been decertified. 20 workers at Starbucks in Kansas City, Missouri, voted 12-4 in favor of unionization with Starbucks Workers United, and 176 security guards at Preeminent Protective Services in Washington, D.C., voted 11-0 in favor of unionization with Preeminent Protective Services Workers United. In strikes and bargaining updates, workers at several D.C. restaurants owned by Star and Knightsbridge unionized recently. Rather than respecting the workers' wishes, management has launched an anti-union campaign, and the union has now called for a boycott of Star's Le Diplomate, Osteria Mauser, The Occidental, and Knightsbridge's Rasica, Modena, and Bombay Club. 64 members of Congress have already signed a pledge to respect the boycott. Non-union carriers operating at the General Motors Bowling Green Assembly Plant in Kentucky are refusing to meet area standard compensation and benefits, undercutting decades of progress made under the Teamsters National Master Automobile Transporters Agreement, NMATA. Teamsters car haul drivers picketed the plant in protest last week. The Teamsters threatened to strike UPS in Kentucky and several other states if the company didn't budge, and budge the company did. As a result of the Teamsters strike threat, the company resolved multiple outstanding grievances and agreed to a first contract for newly unionized administrative workers in Louisville. In their press release celebrating the win, the Teamsters did still point to other outstanding issues, like a lack of movement on new trucks with AC, the illegal buyout offers at UPS, and company violations of contractual time off rules. Workers at Diversicare, a nursing home in Pell City, Alabama, who recently unionized with the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, RWDSU, secured their first union contract with significant pay increases and increased time off, according to the union. Restaurant workers in Kentucky at Feast Barbecue and Royals Hot Chicken, who recently unionized with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW Local 227, secured their first union contract with a $1 an hour wage increase increase immediately and more over the life of the contract, plus health insurance and a grievance process. In political and legislative updates, a man tried to commit a mass shooting at the CDC in Atlanta because of misinformation regarding the COVID vaccine. While he didn't make it into the building, he did kill a police officer in his attempt before being killed himself. The union at the CDC blames the attack in part on their boss, RFK Jr. The week before last, Trump ripped up union contracts with workers at the VA. Last week, he did the same at FEMA and the EPA. Justin Chin, president of AFGE Council 238, which represents 8,000 EPA workers, said the union will continue to fight for its members and the agency's mission. As if ripping up union contracts at the VA was not enough, the Trump administration is now rescinding weeks of parental leave for VA workers, including some who are giving birth this week. No doubt because of decisions like this, doctors who are offered a job at the VA are turning down the offers at 4 times the rate that they were last year. VA employees in Nashville, along with friend of the show Vonda McDaniel, who's president of the Nashville Labor Council, protested these actions and more in a rally last week. The Senate Appropriations Committee voted 26-3 in favor of restoring millions of dollars in funding at public health agencies for the fiscal year that begins on October 1st in a rebuke of some DOGE policies. AFGE leaders at NIOSH and the CDC applauded the move, but cautioned that the budget process is far from over. Railroad Workers United, a cross-craft caucus of railroad workers, issued a statement opposing the proposed merger of Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern. They noted that should the merger move forward and be condoned by the U.S. government, the remaining 2 Class I railroads, BNSF and CSX, would in effect be forced to amalgamate as well, resulting in just 4 major rail corporations controlling not just the industry but the infrastructure as well. Upwards of 90% of the rail traffic of North America will be controlled by these 4 corporations. They point to potential bad outcomes for Amtrak, workers on the railroads, and shippers who use the rails. Most rail unions have been public in their opposition as well. Social Security is 90 this year, and the AFL-CIO celebrated the program while pointing to the ways that the Trump administration is endangering it. And in internal union affairs, Alabama man Nathaniel Lloyd from Local 108 in Bessemer, Alabama, won Apprentice of the Year from the International Brotherhood of Boilermakers. The International Association of Firefighters, IAFF, won an $8 million grant from the National Institutes of Health, NIH, to expand their hazmat response training programs, the largest grant in the union's history. If we missed anything, let us know, tvlr.fm/contact, and we'll include your union updates in next week's roundup. If you would like to get the exhaustive list of what happened last week in Southern Labor, you can subscribe to the newsletter at tvlr.fm. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Really looking forward to our next segment. We're going to be talking to a couple of folks from IFPTE about NASA. Lots of stuff happening there. Matt Biggs is the international president of the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers, IFPTE, and Faraz Khan is the legislative director of IFPTE. We're going to be talking to them about some of the proposed cuts to NASA, what their members do at NASA, and how their union is fighting back with other federal employee unions. Lots of stuff to talk about. I believe we have Matt and Faraz in the Zoom, right? Okay, Faraz Khan is in the Zoom, and Matt is going to be joining in just a moment. Faraz, welcome to the program. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me on, Jacob. Really appreciate the chance to talk about NASA and what our folks do there. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think most listeners know that our show broadcasts from Huntsville, and so that's where the Marshall Space Flight Center is. And IFPTE has a local there. I think the local number is 27. They represent actual rocket scientists at NASA, and so every time that the Labor Council puts out a statement, I make sure to include somewhere in the statement that the Labor Council includes unions that represent workers from rocket scientists to grocery clerks and everything in between. I think it's a great, I think it's really cool having such a wide group of workers represented in the unions that make up our Labor Council. So I appreciate being able to have IFPTE involved here in Huntsville, and I know that IFPTE is doing a lot of work across the country, and so really excited to talk to y'all about NASA. I guess just to start off with, because it is such a, because it's such a something that people don't really think about as far as rocket scientists needing a union. That when people think about unions, they think about coal miners, they think about auto workers, they think about steel workers. And a lot of times they are surprised to hear that rocket scientists are unionized at NASA. So can you take a little bit of time to explain why such employees need and deserve unionization too?
Jacob, thanks for having us. Really appreciate it, and shedding light and transparency on this issue. Yeah, we're a union that represents, like you say, scientists, engineers, lawyers, judges. Every worker needs a union. Every worker, and it doesn't matter whether you're a rocket scientist or like I used to be, working a grocery store. You need every worker needs a union. This is particularly true in the federal sector, right? So we're NASA's biggest union, IFPTE. We represent about 8,000 workers at NASA, civil servants, and federal unions are very important to bring transparency to the taxpaying public about what exactly is going on in these federal agencies. It's also critically important at a place like NASA, where 80% of NASA's budget is actually contracted out. So as a union, and for many years, Faraz does this work now on Capitol Hill, but for many, many years, we would take what we see happening in the agency and what we see happening with these contractors to Capitol Hill to provide proper oversight. So yeah, every worker needs a voice on the job, and that's also true of rocket scientists.
Absolutely. And the being able to kind of speak freely about things that are going on at work. People really don't think about that. But, people think about, when they think about unions, they think about, higher wages. Maybe they think about better working conditions. But the ability to speak freely to your boss is something that it really does go underappreciated, I think, because, folks are rightly scared of their employer. Folks are rightly scared of their supervisor. And like you said, for an agency like NASA, where 80% of the budget is eaten up by contractors, being able to have the freedom to say to your supervisor, I think maybe some of these funds are being misused, or maybe there's some waste, fraud, or abuse happening in this program, and not fearing repercussions is something that's really, really incredibly important, and something that it's really difficult to get without unionization. And so that's why, rocket scientists at NASA in Huntsville and all across the country have decided to unionize in large part with IFPTE. And so that's I really appreciate y'all taking the time to talk to us about that. And we wanted to talk about some of the concerns that people have, that people inside the agency have about the preservation of the agency's mission, right? And, you would think there's a way that a robust NASA could fit into like a Make America Great Again Trump agenda of a vibrant and aspirational USA. A lot of times the callbacks in the Make America Great Again stuff is back to like the 60s, where we were putting people on the moon with NASA, and it takes a lot of money to do that. And so, before we talk about what Trump is doing, which is not that, unfortunately, what could a more vibrant an aspirational agenda of investing deeply in our scientific research into space exploration look like?
I could answer that question, but I'm going to defer to my colleague Faraz here. So go ahead and take that one.
Yeah,
Faraz.
yeah. So Jacob, I just want to respond. First of all, you're absolutely right here. NASA is a unmistakable American icon, and it's not just Americans that recognize that, but people the world over, really do get the record of accomplishment, but also just on a day-to-day basis, you run into people certainly in Washington D.C. coming out of the Air and Space Museum, or at the airport, you see people wearing NASA branded shirts and hoodies. It is a core part of America's history of scientific leadership. We see this as a critical moment right now, where the United States is now competing with other nations in a race to return humans to the moon. And instead of seeing just a very clear message that America's scientific leadership, America's technological leadership, and our record that we have of human space exploration will be invested in. We're seeing just a really deeply narrow vision of what NASA ought to be, and it's basically really just an impossible vision of NASA being able to be successful in any way. Just we'll get into this here, but right now we're looking at a NASA workforce that's already been slashed by about 22% of the workforce that we had at the start of the year, and that's been these are my words, not our members, but when they tell me how they've made the decision to leave NASA, it sounds like they've been bullied to leave NASA. They've taken, we've had a tremendous number of our membership take the deferred resignation offers, but also a lot of their bosses, a lot of the leadership of NASA, the higher level management types have walked out the door. That's experience and expertise you really need in this moment. If you want NASA to really sort of continue its mission, to expand its mission, if you want to try to accelerate, America's focus to returning to the moon, but also accelerating to Mars, accelerating the human exploration of Mars, you can't do it if you're making these massive cuts to the workforce, and then the consistent message we keep getting is that there will be a massive cut to the budget. And right now, Congress has not approved any cuts to NASA's budget. But that's the message that our members are getting. That's the message NASA workers are getting. That's also the message that NASA contractors are getting. So I think there's actually quite a large community that's on the same page here. That what's happening at NASA is just a self-inflicted wound here. So it's deeply troubling, and it's a bad choice that the administration is making, and ultimately it hurts even the Trump administration's goals of just focusing on returning to the moon and going to Mars with American astronauts.
Absolutely. We're talking now to Faraz Khan, Legislative Director of IFPTE, and Matt Biggs, International President of IFPTE. IFPTE is the largest union at NASA, representing some 8,000 workers there. And so let's talk about then what has the Trump administration's stance been like towards NASA? What are the things that have been pushing people out of the door, making people feel like they're not welcome, making people feel like, the agency is not going to be the same now and into the future as it has been? And I guess we can go to you for that, President Biggs.
Yeah, well, it started even before January 20th when President Trump assumed office again, unfortunately. He has an OMB director that actually said, out of the Heritage Foundation, that was the architect of that Project 2025, by the way. He actually said that he wanted federal employees to wake up every day and be traumatized at the idea of going to work. That's the entire federal workforce. And NASA picked up that ball and ran with it. And like Farad said, these workers, these brilliant scientists and engineers, have been literally bullied to leave the space agency, and it's thousands of workers that have left. These are brilliant scientists, brilliant engineers, human factors people. I mean, you can't go to the moon and Mars without doing the human factors work first, for example. And they're showing them the door as if they're meaningless. These are workers that have been around for decades at NASA. Some of them are world-renowned scientists, top of their field, that have been shown the door. It's really terrible. It sends a chill message across the workforce, and it's really damaging to the agency. Obviously, I mean that's obvious, right? But it's to a point where you wonder, can NASA ever recover from something like this? And like Farad said, the president, his budget proposal for fiscal year 2026 for NASA, huge, steep cuts to NASA. I mean, 25%, almost a 25% across the board cut to the NASA budget. The science budget, 47% cut to the science budget. Huge cuts to aeronautics. You're not going to the moon and Mars without doing the science work first. And they seem to they have a short-sighted approach to it. There's no way this is going to happen with these kinds of cuts. Fortunately, I will say Congress, we don't have Senator Mikulski and Senator Shelby around anymore to save NASA, right? They used to work together to fund NASA properly. And I'll say across administrations, NASA has not been properly funded, but this takes it to a new level. But fortunately, appropriators, at least in the Senate side, normally this would be bad, but at least in the Senate side, they seem to want to fund NASA at the FY25 levels and reject the Trump approach. So normally that would be bad, but under the circumstances, I think we'll take that. But yeah, if Congress does not step in, and they haven't shown a willingness to take on this president, but if this Republican-led Congress does not step in and appropriate the money for NASA, it's going to get to a point where it's going to be irreversible, I fear.
And I do hope that they do step up, and we're maybe starting to see some signs of some willingness to do that. We just saw last week that the Senate Appropriations Committee actually voted to restore millions of dollars in funding that DOJ had taken away from the CDC and NIOSH. And so hopefully, that continues. AFGE applauded that move, but, made sure to mention that, the budget process is far from over. And so even though, we're seeing maybe the Senate reject some of these DOJ cuts at the CDC and NIOSH and NASA, it still has to pass the full Senate. It still has to pass the House, and we're a long way off from that. But hopefully those trends sort of continue, because it's going to be very bad if Congress does accept the Trump budget cuts to CDC, NIOSH, and NASA, and like you said, it'd be difficult. Just flat funding, it would already be difficult because NASA, like so many other federal agencies, is contra the public narrative, is actually underfunded. We need much more robust public sector agencies, and they need more funding than they have right now. But flat funding would be better than 25 and 47% cuts. And so, but even if we get the budget, Trump is still, firing people left and right. He's still implementing all of these changes that are making the agencies less effective. Can you talk about those sort of interactions, kind of on the ground or from administrators and supervisors? Like, how is NASA dealing with its unions at this point, outside of kind of the larger budget conversations?
Go ahead, Faraz.
Yeah. So I think it's important to understand that coming into this administration for the last 13 years, NASA had been ranked as the best place to work amongst the large federal agencies by the Partnership for Public Service. That's because there was a high level of employee commitment and engagement. As Matt mentioned, across different administrations, we've had working relationships. Our locals have had good working relationships with NASA leadership. that all changed at the start of the Trump administration. It's been, I mean, and certainly the proof of that is the fact that we've had 4,000 people at NASA, over 4,000 people take the deferred resignation offers, right? There's been a shattering of the trust, and a big part of that, along with the president's budget request, is the fact that we haven't really had anything that looks like leadership at NASA. We've had an interim NASA administrator, Janet Petro, who's no longer there. We had a nominee for NASA administrator who is going to get a vote in the Senate. I think it was in early June or might have been late May. And then just before he was going to be likely to be confirmed to be the NASA administrator, the White House yanked his nomination. And so now we're left with an interim administrator who also happens to be the Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy. There's just a massive vacuum of leadership at NASA, at the agency level, and where there's a vacuum of leadership, there's also a vacuum of accountability, right? So we can't get a clear explanation of who's running the show, who's calling the shots, and where a lot of these decisions are coming from. A big part of that being ranked the best place to work is the fact that the unions at NASA, our locals, have been really effective at making sure they talk to management and they make management understand that as frontline workers, they have a perspective and they have knowledge of how the work is done and how the work ought to be done. So our members can be successful and NASA can be successful. That's all been eroded. And in that place, we don't really have a clear sense of who's running the show, who's making these decisions. We try as much as we can to maintain those relationships with at the various centers and facilities with NASA management. But again, it is a directionless agency at this point. And when you don't have a direction, you don't have strong leadership. The real fear is that it's going to be the Trump administration. It's going to be OMB Director Russ Vought that's calling the shots, and don't have any sense or any understanding of what they're doing, or if they do have a sense or understanding of it, they don't appreciate the destruction they're causing right now and intend to cause coming up here in the months ahead.
Right now, I think Sean Duffy is acting administrator of NASA, and his nomination to the Department of Transportation was met with sort of cautious optimism and endorsements from some unions, including the AFA. I think the AFA endorsed Sean Duffy, his nomination. But you're saying that so far IFPTE hasn't been able to build a relationship with Duffy yet.
I think there's just a lack of focus on NASA right now, right? And to be clear, like we do want there to be confirmed leadership at NASA, but we want it to be confirmed leadership at NASA that understands you can't, just as Matt said, you can't go to the moon, you can't go to Mars without science. Right. You can't without the fundamental research to guide the work that NASA does on the human space exploration side. There's also really no purpose to doing it. Like, what is NASA going to do with the results of these missions if you don't actually have robust funding for science, right? That's sort of that's how NASA is integrated together, and that's what's made it so successful. So it's a really unfortunate situation where without clear guidance, without clear leadership, and somebody that's really focused on NASA, especially at this moment where we've had this massive gutting of the skills and expertise of the NASA workforce already. It's a moment where we need to start, really like stop the bleeding here and start to repair what's already been done.
Right. And so, President Big, go ahead.
I should note, we've tried countless times to meet with Petro when she was there, and Duffy, and we've been met with excuse after excuse after excuse why they can't meet with us. We actually had a meeting scheduled, I think, at one point, didn't we, for Oz, and they backed out of it. So they don't have much interest in meeting with their unions, unfortunately, at least at the very top level of NASA.
That's unfortunate, and it is worth noting that, you know, we were talking earlier in the program. The Trump administration has ripped up union contracts with the VA, the EPA, with FEMA, and so far NASA has been exempt from that. NASA was not called out in that executive order from back in April or whenever it was, and so the collective bargaining agreements between NASA and its unions, like IFPTE, are still in effect. The Trump administration has not even attempted to roll those back at this time, and so it's worth people, you know, it's worth NASA employees knowing that all of those rights are still kind of in play in a more real way than they are at other agencies. And so, you know, President Biggs, I'm interested in how IFPTE is thinking about this and responding to all of these threats, to the potential budget cuts, to to attempts to make NASA a worse place to work. Like what is IFPTE doing to try to fight back on all of these fronts?
Well, you mentioned the elimination of union contracts and such. Yeah, NASA was not included in that executive order, fortunately. We of course represent a lot of tens of thousands of DoD workers too. So we were a part of a lawsuit. Actually, I think we were the lead plaintiff on a lawsuit about a month ago against that executive order. So we're working that part over there. But with NASA, I mean, it's really, like I said before, it's really critically important for Congress to step up and correct this. NASA, like Faraz said earlier, it's like the #1 brand in the world, NASA. It's so well respected. The investment that taxpayers make into NASA pays off a lot more than what we invest in NASA. I think it's $3 benefit for every $1 we invest. And the benefits that everyday Americans benefit from for NASA today are immense. So Congress, in a bipartisan way, has always supported NASA, and we're hopeful that will continue even during these dire circumstances, and even with a Republican Congress that, it's unprecedented. They have bent the knee to Donald Trump and given him everything he wants. We are hopeful, though, in this case, like you pointed out, the Senate appropriators, they are rejecting some of what Trump is calling for in his budget, and we are hopeful, even though it's a long process, like you point out, to get whatever we're going to get in the final funding bill. We are hopeful that Congress brings some level of accountability to this Trump administration and properly funds agencies like NASA and other science agencies for that matter.
Right. Absolutely. President Biggs, international president of the International Federation of Professional and Technical Employees. We've been talking to him, and Faraz Khan, the legislative director of IFPTE. IFPTE represents some 8,000 workers at NASA all across the country. How can listeners who work at NASA get in touch with the union and join the union and be a part of, fighting to protect not only their jobs, which is obviously going to be kind of the most direct impact. I want to protect my job. I want to make my job a good place to work, but also, preserve the mission. If you wanted to make a whole lot of money, you could work somewhere other than NASA. Presumably you have some sort of interest in the mission of NASA, and IFPTE is at the forefront of trying to protect not just the jobs of workers there, but the mission of the agency. If somebody works at NASA, how can they get in touch with IFPTE and join the union?
You can contact me directly. My email is mbiggs@ifpte.org. Our website is ifpte.org, and our telephone number is 202-239-4880. I will say, if you are in an IFPTE bargaining unit or an AFGE bargaining unit, we work hand in hand with AFGE on these issues, by the way. Great partners with IFPTE. If you're in a bargaining unit and you're not a member, sign up to be a member. That's #1. It's very easy. Just sign up, become a dues-paying member. The more members we have, the stronger we are as a union. If you are not represented, you go to ifpt.org, or you can email me directly, and we will have organizers contact you to start the organizing process. Faraz, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, and yeah, the other website we also have, if it's easier to remember, is joinifpte.org. That is our organizing website, and you can also see the types of members who we represent across the United States and Canada, at the different federal agencies, but also in the private sector. And I think along with what Matt's saying, if you are in IFPTE bargaining and you're not a member, yes, please join, but also be active and engaged in your union. This is the time now, I think, to really make sure we marshal our forces here, and the authentic voice of NASA employees. There's no substitute for that. And the other thing is, we're talking to members of Congress. Our members at all the different NASA centers are reaching out to their members of Congress as well, not just to support NASA's budget and reject the Trump administration's massive budget cuts, but also making sure that they ask their members of Congress to stand up and tell the administration not to enact a budget, not to do something that is wholly illegitimate and illegal, not to enact a budget ahead of what Congress has done. Even on the House side, they're rejecting the Trump administration's budget cuts. They're still cutting the NASA budget, unfortunately, on the House Republican side, but not as deeply as the Trump administration goes, because those cuts are entirely unworkable, and it's equivalent to waving a white flag if we are in fact in a space race with China.
Right. Faraz Khan, Matt Biggs, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jacob. Appreciate you having
me. Thank you.
Yes, sir. We're going to take a break really quick. We're going to be right back with Boss Watch.
This is Elise Bryant from the Labor Heritage Power Hour. We're proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, with more than 200 labor radio shows and podcasts from across the country and around the world. The Labor Radio Podcast Network, where working people speak. Find us at laborradionetwork.org.
The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by LaborNotes. LaborNotes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about LaborNotes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communications system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think about what we've been talking about on the show, or ask us a question, in particular if it's about unions. That's our thing, and those are the questions that we are most suited to answer. 844-899-TVLR. You can also leave us a voicemail at any time if you are not hearing this live. There's a strike going on in Missouri right now, Adam. What's going on?
That's right. Yeah, there's a big strike happening in Missouri and Illinois. And so wanted to share this update from the IAM Union, International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers. Brian Bryant, who is the international president of the 600,000 member strong IAM, recently sent letters urging members of Missouri's congressional delegation to stand with the more than 3,200 IAM District 837 members currently on strike at Boeing defense facilities in Missouri as well as Illinois. And so we've got a strike of over 3,000 workers at Boeing Defense. And in the letters to the senators and representatives of Missouri's congressional delegation, Bryant urged lawmakers to help protect the future of the highly skilled aerospace workforce by pressing Boeing to return to the bargaining table. The IAM is also asking members of Congress to join the local members on the picket line. For generations, IAM union members at Boeing Defense have worked tirelessly to produce the finest planes and other defense equipment the world has ever seen, said Bryant. Our members have made innumerable sacrifices over the years, building fighter jets and other military equipment which ensure the safety and success of our men and women in uniform. Our members at Boeing Defense in Missouri and Illinois are disappointed and frustrated with the company's recent contract proposals, forcing them to overwhelmingly vote to reject the proposal and go on strike. Throughout these negotiations, the union has presented the company with a number of viable solutions to adequately meet our members' needs. Our members rightly believe the compensation package offered by the company is not adequate given the recent economic trends of high inflation and skyrocketing demand for highly skilled aerospace workers. IAM members assemble and maintain advanced aircraft and weapon systems, including the F-15, the F-A-18, and cutting-edge missile and defense technologies. And according to the union, their work is vital in safeguarding national security and supporting U.S. and allied defense operations. So, we'll see how the congressional delegation responds. I think that's always an interesting thing when you have a strike somewhere. How do the local elected officials respond to it? Do they stay quiet? Do they side with the company? Or will they actually, show up to the picket line? Will they sign their name in support of the workers on strike? Because it's always a tough decision to go on strike, right? That is not an easy thing to do. It is typically the last recourse because things have broken down at the bargaining table. So we'll see what happens. We'll see, how long this strike is going to go on. It's been on for a little bit now. Started a little bit earlier this summer, so we'll see how it plays out. I'm very curious to know how some of these politicians will respond, because this is interesting in the context of the military-industrial complex receiving more and more and more and more money. Right, the government is cutting basically everything except for quote unquote defense. Right, so it's going to be interesting to see if these defense workers can actually win the kind of contract they deserve. They absolutely deserve to get some of that money that's flowing around, right? They're the ones building these products. It's only right that they would get some of that. And, I think it's important whenever we have strikes that we send our support and solidarity to those folks, because it is such a difficult ask. But it is ultimately one of our most important and powerful tools that we have in our tool belt as working people, our ability to collectively shut down production, right? To take that collective action to shut down production, to withhold our labor, is very, very potent. The company has to pay attention to that. So we'll see how long it takes. We'll see, how it plays out. But I wanted to share that we do have a big strike happening. St. Louis and St. Charles, Missouri, here in the South, as well as in Illinois. Again, over 3,000 workers are involved at IAM District 837. So, keep us posted. We'd love to hear from members of IAM. If you are involved in the strike, if you are, or if you're a community member, right, and you've been visiting the picket line over there in St. Louis. I know we've got listeners out in Missouri as well. So definitely let us know. Give us a call, 844-899-TVLR. Fill us in on what's going on with the strike, how it's going, how the picket lines are going out in your community.
Other unions have sent their support as well, including District 751 of the Machinists Union. Those are that district represents 33,000 machinists at Boeing in Washington, around the Seattle area. They went on strike just last summer, I believe it was. Right. We had multiple members of that union on the program to talk about that strike. And the white-collar union at Boeing in the Washington area, SPEA, the Society of Professional Engineering Employees in Aerospace, something like that. It's an IFPTE local. They represent 19,000 aerospace professionals, mostly at Boeing. So both of those unions, big Boeing unions, sending their support and solidarity to IAM District 837. So would love to hear from folks on the ground. Give us a call, 844-899-TVLR. Let us know what's happening. We're going to get to Boss Watch. Boss Watch is a segment that we do every week where we try to take a look at what bosses are up to in the South. We're going to start right here in Alabama with the Serafina Network, a management company for gas station convenience stores based in Alabama. They're going to be paying $40,000 and furnishing other relief to settle a disability discrimination lawsuit filed by the EEOC. According to the lawsuit, store managers, employees, and customers routinely mocked a neurodivergent cashier with eye problems, anxiety, and a seizure disorder. The lawsuit further charged that after receiving complaints about the harassment, the store manager responded by demanding that the employee provide a medical release related to a seizure episode. The employer subsequently refused to accept a medical release tendered by the employee and proceeded to terminate him. The business failed to maintain any anti-harassment or anti-discrimination policies or train employees about their obligations under federal anti-discrimination laws. Such alleged conduct violates the ADA, which prohibits disability-based discrimination and retaliation. So the EEOC filed suit, and then they got this settlement for this employee. So really cool stuff there. Heading over to federal workers, the EEOC recently issued 3 noteworthy appellate decisions. The EEOC's Office of Federal Operations clarifying the federal government's statutory obligations under federal anti-discrimination laws and federal court precedent to provide reasonable accommodations to religious employees and to pregnant federal employees. These decisions signify EEOC's renewed and ongoing commitment to timely and even-handed application of anti-discrimination law to the federal workforce. So the first two EEOC decisions provide a clear statement of the federal government's obligation under Title VII to provide its employees with effective, reasonable accommodations for their religious beliefs and practices, unless doing so would impose an undue hardship on the government's operations. In Augustine v. Department of Veterans Affairs, the Department of Veterans Affairs was found liable for failing to accommodate a Muslim physician's practice of attending weekly prayer service. In Andy B. v. the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, the Federal Reserve Board was found liable for failing to accommodate a Christian police officer's request for exemption from the government agency's COVID-19 vaccine mandate. And then the third decision, KCL v. USPS, demonstrates the EEOC's commitment to protecting the dignity, health, and equal opportunity of pregnant women in the federal workforce. In KCL, the USPS was found liable for discriminatorily requiring a new mother to use the employee bathroom for her lactation needs when other clean private spaces were readily available. This case arose prior to the passage of the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, which went into effect on June 27, 2023. The PWFA requires covered employers, including the federal government, to provide reasonable accommodations to workers affected by pregnancy, childbirth, or related medical conditions, unless doing so would cause undue hardship. Under the Pregnancy Discrimination Act of 1978, however, an employer did not necessarily have an affirmative duty to provide workplace accommodations for pregnancy-related conditions, but in KCL, the EEOC concluded that the USPS's decision to exclude its employee from available clean and private spaces for lactation was tainted by discriminatory bias and therefore unlawful. Federal law states that employers must provide reasonable accommodations to eligible employees or consider reasonable alternatives if appropriate. So, mostly good decisions from the EEOC there. Union Busters is a segment of Boss Watch that is sponsored by LaborLab. LaborLab is an employer watchdog organization that they're committed to safeguarding the right to organize through unions, collective bargaining, and mutual aid. They do this by combing through reports that Union Busters are required to file with the Department of Labor. Here are the new filings from last week. Amazon in California hired Road Warrior Productions for almost $4,000 a day and a total of $121,000 over the course of the agreement. International Motors hired Road Warrior Productions for $3,500 a day. Pacific Propeller International in Washington hired Davis, Grimm, Payne, and Mara for $440 an hour. That union election is still open. Imperial Dade in Florida hired Quest Consulting. That union election is still open. And Midwest Refrigerated Services in Wisconsin hired G&E Consulting Services for $212.50 an hour. If you want to hear the rest of Boss Watch, if you want to read the rest of Boss Watch, you can subscribe to our newsletter, TVLR.fm, and you will get both Boss Watch and Last Week in Southern Labor in your email inbox every single week. You'll also be privy to announcements from the show when we have them. We're going to be wrapping up here in the first half of the show, going to be going into overtime. Lots to talk about in overtime. We're going to be talking to LaborLab's Bob Funk about a recent report that they did. We're going to be talking about trainings that the Federal Unionists Network is offering to federal employees and more. So find us on Facebook and YouTube at The Valley Labor Report to continue listening. If you don't do that, though, we appreciate you listening on the radio, and we'll see you next week. All right, we're off the radio now. Appreciate everybody staying tuned. We're going to take a break. We're going to be right back with Overtime.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio and online news outfit in the South, coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us. If you'd like to call in, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Got a lot of stuff to get to today. Going to be talking to Bob Funk about a recent report from LaborLab. We're going to be talking to Colin Smalley from the Federal Unionists Network about some trainings that they are offering. And we're going to be talking to Luis Leon about some of his recent reporting and writing. But before we get to any of that, we're going to be talking about Blue Oval. Workers at Blue Oval SK in Kentucky are going to be voting on a union on whether or not to unionize with the UAW on August 26th and 27th. So that is coming up, folks. I mean, that is like a week and a half away, coming up really soon. The UAW just released one of their trademark incredible videos, and we're going to play that for you now.
In 1941, Ford Auto Workers changed history. Facing workplace injuries, exhaustion, and deaths on the job,
Ford workers took a stand that would echo through the generations.
They came together and organized.
And as United Auto Workers, won the right to negotiate over all of their working conditions.
This history is not just a source of pride, it's a lesson in solidarity.
To show what's possible when working class people stand together.
Today, Kentucky is the center of the battery belt.
We're building the future of the auto industry, and this transformative moment requires the same worker power that guarantees our safety and job security.
Whether in Dearborn, Michigan, or Glendale, Kentucky, the technology may differ, but the risks remain the same.
Wherever corporate greed puts our lives at risk, the fight for a safe workplace binds us together.
It's our time to sit across the table for management as equals.
We want a legally binding contract that guarantees our wages,
healthcare,
PTO policies,
and health and safety.
Workers in Michigan began a wave that changed America.
Battery workers in Ohio, Tennessee, and Indiana have already taken this step and won.
Now it's our turn.
I'm ready to have a voice at Boss.
I'm ready to have a voice at Boss.
As United Auto Workers.
Really great to see that. We're looking forward to hopefully seeing a win after the 27th of August. That's going to be a really, really big deal if the UAW is able to pull it off. Because like they said in that video, you know, Kentucky is becoming sort of the EV capital of the country. Lots of EV manufacturing is coming online in Kentucky. So, including at Blue Oval. Blue Oval is a joint venture between Ford and SK Technologies, a South Korean company, and they are and so this is one of those joint ventures that the American manufacturers have been doing, and so that's why organizing them is so important because you know, the more that the non-union automotive industry is able to proliferate, the more that they are able to increase their market share, the more difficult it is going to be for the UAW to maintain standards at Ford, GM, and Stellantis. So organizing the non-union auto sector is really important. And, you know, I mean, it's going to be great for these workers. You know, I mean, folks at Blue Oval make significantly less than workers at Ford, and there's no reason for that. They're doing very similar work, even though, like they said, the technology is different. They're doing ultimately very similar work, and so they should be paid very similarly. You know, they should have, and they need special, you know, they need special protections from the way, you know, from the things that are different about EV manufacturing, as you know, the way that it's different from internal combustion engine automotive manufacturing. So looking forward to seeing a win for them. And, if you're out there at Blue Oval and you're seeing this, give us a call at 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857. You can leave us a voicemail at any time. We'd love to hear from you and hear how the campaign is going, hear why you are voting the way that you're voting in the election. Talk to us about how management is reacting, anything like that at all. Again, that phone number is 844-899-TVLR. Adam, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add.
Just that it's a big deal, right? This is a brand new industry, a relatively new industry to this country. It's a growing industry, and it's going to be critical that we make sure all these new jobs are good union jobs, because they don't have to be, right? It's up to us to make it so. A lot of jobs that we currently think of as good union jobs didn't start out that way. We organized and fought to make them that way. And I think, auto work is a perfect example of that. Auto working jobs were not that great initially. But, through the success of workers organizing, building unions like UAW, taking collective action, taking monumental risk in some of the historic strikes they led. But, it starts here. It starts here. You've had conversations with your coworkers. Enough coworkers have come together. You've banded together. You've made it to this far in the process where you have a vote. And it's really important to get everyone out there to vote. It's really important to talk to folks and listen to what's going on. And try to round up as many yes votes as possible. We know that there's going to be folks that are tough to crack on that. There's going to be a lot of folks who are on the fence, though, who are hearing different things from different sides. People are in their ear about a lot of different things. And it's really important to have those conversations with folks and really help folks understand the union difference. I've heard people vote no for all kinds of reasons, and frankly, they're usually pretty silly when you boil it down to the reality of it. Because even a union that you may not agree with everything they do, or you may think they could do some things better, even a union like that is better than having no union at all. Having the protection of your coworkers coming together as a union is just a game changer. I've worked in non-union jobs. I've worked union jobs, and it is a big damn difference when you have protection, when you know that you can go to work and not be just treated any sort of way, when you know you can be at work, and if you see something unsafe, if you see something dangerous, that you can report that, right? And you can know that you're not going to face retaliation, or if you do face retaliation, you have people to have your back. That's a union difference. It's not just the wages. It's not just the benefits, all of which will get better. That's a proven fact that in unions, we are able to win better wages and better benefits, like retirement, like health care. But it's also the safety on the job. It's the voice on the job. It's the protection on the job. Because all it takes is one unfair supervisor, one false accusation, one honest mistake, right, for your entire career, your livelihood to be in jeopardy. And it's so critical that you have a union to have your back. So I'm just sending our love and solidarity to these workers out there. Congratulations on making it this far. You're this close. Let's bring it home.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely don't listen to the union busters that are paid hundreds of dollars an hour, thousands of dollars a day to convince you not to unionize. Speaking of union busters, we have Bob Funk on. Bob Funk is not a union buster. He is the executive director of LaborLab, an organization that tries to keep a check on union busters. Bob, welcome back to the program. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me. It's always great to be on. You guys do such incredible work.
I appreciate that. It's great to have you, and same to you. I mean, we really appreciate the work that LaborLab does. I spent a lot of time actually going back and forth with y'all on this recent Navistar election in Huntsville. Unfortunately, obviously didn't go the way that we wanted it to go, but I do think that we were able to get the word out to at least some workers about who was in their plant and how much money they typically make. And that's kind of the value of your organization, is letting people know who these people are that are getting paid hundreds of dollars an hour to come in and propagandize, to propagandize workers against their own power as a group of workers. Can you talk a little bit more about just the mission of LaborLab and what y'all want to do?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jacob, for the opportunity. LaborLab at its heart is about protecting workers and their organizing rights, and specifically protecting workers from secretive and oftentimes illegal union busting campaigns. Under federal law, and a lot of people within our movement aren't aware of this, but under federal law, when an employer hires union busters, consultants, law firms to bust workers and persuade them against joining a union, they are legally responsible and required to notify the public and employees that they've engaged in these agreements. And Congress is very clear about this. Workers deserve to have all the information before they vote. We have a huge problem when it comes to how the law is implemented. Union busters and the employers that hire them have been thumbing their nose at the Department of Labor and these regulations for decades, honestly, since the inception of this law. And what that means practically is that we have people coming into workplaces and insinuating or absolutely just straight up lying and saying that they're experts from the NLRB, or they're just there to answer questions about what it means to be in a union, where they're not actually disclosing the fact that they were hired by the employer specifically to persuade the employees against organizing. And that's hugely detrimental when you have someone in the workplace that is telling you, oh, I'm just here to answer questions and I'm an expert from the NLRB. Their words carry a lot of weight and can have a huge impact on the outcome of the election. Additionally, they're supposed to be telling us how much they're getting paid, and that is an incredibly powerful organizing point. If in the middle of an organizing campaign, your employer is willing to bring on a union buster and pay them $500 an hour, $5,000 a day, that really makes it clear where their priorities are when it comes to their own workforce. And that has a huge implication on the outcome of these elections. So at the heart of what we're trying to do is simply make employers and the union busting industry play by the same rules that the rest of us have to play by. And that's be transparent and fair to workers and not operate in the shadows and secretively.
Yeah, can you talk to us a little bit more about those rules? What are they specifically? What do union busters and employers have to report? And what do unions have to report? Because unions similarly have reporting requirements that were levied on them by the LMRDA. Can you talk to us about what those rules are? Who has to file? What do they have to file? And when do they have to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. In the following the passage of the NLRA, the Congress decided to pass the Labor Management Relations and Disclosure Act. And I know that that's an incredibly catchy name for a bill, but essentially what it was to ensure that all workers' rights are being protected. That means that their union, it's the law that put in place that the union has to disclose how all of their finances and how the money was spent at the end of the fiscal year. As a union member myself, I've looked at my union's forms and disclosures, and it's been very helpful in making sure that our union's more democratic. The problem is that unions play by the rules. Overwhelmingly, unions meet disclosure rules under the law, and workers are served better by that. The problem is that the law also said that employers and union busters have to do the same thing. In fact, it's even more important. Congress said that if you hire a union buster, they need to report that in a timely manner so that workers actually have the information before they cast their ballots. This information includes what the consultant's hired to do, whether it's, we see lots of surveillance, which is essentially spying on workers or collecting information on workers, whether they're being paid to run captive audience meetings, whether they're being paid to do, ride-alongs and one-on-ones to badger workers all day, or if they're simply there to train management to do the union busting for them, and then also the rates that they're getting paid for. Unfortunately, as our reporting shows, the vast majority of these union busters and employers are not playing by the rules, and as a result, workers are suffering. And it's also their financial reports that are due as well at the end of the year. And I know that doesn't sound incredibly exciting, but it's incredibly important. Let's say you get to an election. Let's say you win that election. Everyone knows that the next hard part that is sometimes even more difficult is getting to a contract. Well, this is incredibly important financial information to have on hand when you're going to the bargaining table. If an employer comes up and says, "Oh yeah, no, we can't afford that," well, you literally have the receipt signed under penalty of perjury saying, "Well, it looked like you had the money last year to hire a team of union busters and spend, millions of dollars on that." And this isn't an exaggeration. We're working on a campaign right now in Iowa. We're following that very closely. It's the largest organizing effort that has happened in Iowa since the 1930s. Almost none of their union busters are playing by the rules, but we know that they have spent $2 million on about 8 persuaders in the first quarter of this year. So we're probably up to another 4 million to bust about 1,800 nurses in Iowa. And that information has been kept from them. We are working to make sure that those nurses have that information and actually know who's talking to them, and who it is that's in their workplace. And we have so many cases of, especially like with nurses, where the consultant comes in and basically builds dossiers on all the nurses, leverage points, and then that's what we call surveillance. And then they're doing the captive audience meetings, subjecting workers to one-on-ones every day. And they try to claim, "Oh, we're just here to answer your questions," but they are there to collect information and persuade. And the only way that we can prove that is through these disclosures. And when they don't play by the rules, the work that we do at LaborLab is, well, we know who this person is. We have the information on how much they get paid. We know what their tactics are. So if they're not going to play by the rules, we're going to release that information.
Right. And that's incredible. And Amazon is one of the biggest spenders on union busters. Looks like last year they spent $14 million in 2024 on union busters. Just an obscene amount of money. And so LaborLab did a report that seeks to really quantify the degree to which folks who have to file with the Office of Labor Management Standards, which is like the organization within the Department of Labor that kind of keeps up with all of this stuff. You have a report that seeks to understand the degree to which people who have to file with the OLMS are actually doing that. And you mentioned earlier, you alluded to the fact that unions file the things that they're supposed to file at a much higher rate than the union busters. Can you give what are those numbers? Like, what are the top line findings from this report?
Yeah, it's pretty shocking, and has led us to a lot of conclusions. We've obviously been tracking union buster and employer compliance with the law for a while. And the noise we made actually resulted in an Inspector General report of the Department of Labor that found that the Department of Labor was failing to meet its mandate to protect the rights of workers to organize. What was really interesting is that this last year there was a similar report that came out on union compliance, which it was great. We do all the research, but now we've got 2 government reports, and we can really compare apples to apples when it comes to compliance. And the numbers are more shocking than you would have even assumed. So the reports that unions have to submit to the Department of Labor every year are incredibly in-depth and time-consuming. If you've ever looked at a union's financial disclosure, I mean, it almost feels like they're going down to like what brand of toilet paper they buy for their office. I mean, like that is an exaggeration, but literally almost how in-depth these reports are. It's important to keep in mind that there are about 21,000 unions in the country. 83% of them file on time everything that they need. 83% of them. So we're talking about 18,000 unions get all of their paperwork in on time. The other percentage that don't almost universally enroll in a voluntary compliance program. It's often an issue like we've got a new secretary treasurer at a union or something like that. If they just aren't familiar with it, they play by the rules, and then that compliance, it just continues to climb up every single year. Now, on the other side, we have the inverse, where it is literally, we are talking about of the employers that owe on a financial report from last year on how much they spent on union busting, only 34% of them filed on time.
Wow.
The same percentage for union busters. And what gets so frustrating, again, so I want to be very clear with these numbers. We're talking 60% of over 60% of employers, over 60% of union busters are hiding the activities that they engaged in last year, and hiding that from workers and from the public and customers as well, right? What's so frustrating is that we're talking about 160 union busting firms. We're talking about, a couple hundred employers that hired these consultants. The fact that we cannot get them to play by the rules is incredibly frustrating, because we know that the Department of Labor has the ability and the capacity to improve compliance, because they've done it with unions, right? Like unions all play by the rules, and there's literally 21,000 of them. The fact that we're talking about a few hundred employers and union busting firms in the Department of Labor is just letting them off the hook, and there aren't any audits of them happening. There aren't any subpoenas. This should be incredibly easy work. If you go to our website, we literally, in our report that talks about these numbers, we list out all the employers and all the union busters that still haven't complied. The fact that the Department of Labor can't get these guys to play by the rules just shows you how broken our system is and the two-tiered justice system we have when it comes to labor relations. No one in the labor movement expects us to get a fair shake, right? We're always the deck seems to always be against us, but this is just such a black and white example of agency prioritizing, making workers play by rules while billionaires play by a completely different set of rules with no accountability and no repercussions.
And I just want to underscore that, because we talk about it all the time. We are not exaggerating when we say these union busters individually make to $200 an hour at the low end, right?
Oh, yeah.
$300, $400, $500 an hour is not uncommon, plus expenses. And like you said, there's very few of these people. There's like 200 of these freaks that kind of travel all across the country doing this work. And so like you could literally fit basically every anti-union persuader in a mid-sized conference room. And the majority of them are not in compliance. And this is their job, right? This is like they're getting paid hundreds of dollars an hour to be experts, quote unquote, in labor law to benefit employers. Whereas we have, like you said, far more unions, 21,000 unions. The vast majority of them are compliant, and the ones that are not are trying to get compliant. Like there's very few people in the union world that are purposely non-compliant. And when we're talking about unions, we are not talking about people that are paid hundreds of dollars an hour to be experts in labor law. We are talking the vast majority of the people that are responsible for filing their LM forms are not experts in labor law. They are the only person who was willing to sacrifice their time to be secretary treasurer of their small 80-person local in the middle of nowhere, Alabama, and they got no training in LM stuff. They got no training in anything from the last secretary treasurer because they died suddenly or they retired or they moved away and they weren't doing a great job. And so like they're just normal ass people, and they're getting it done. And these, I mean, it's just so frustrating. These fucking freaks get paid hundreds of dollars an hour and they're not doing, like, they have one job and they're not doing it. And it's so infuriating. And you just, like, it's crazy. It's crazy. How do they, but I mean, the bottom line is that because they know all this stuff, because, their job is to kind of be experts in labor law and everything. We think this is done on purpose, right? We think that probably, obviously, allegedly, I think, to kind of forestall any litigation, I think that these people are doing it on purpose to hide things from the workers that they are trying to persuade, right? I mean, I don't know how we can come to any other conclusion.
I mean, Jacob, you hit it on the head completely. I mean, what is so disingenuous? I mean, what it comes down to is either these union busters are liars or incompetent, right?
Right. They're liars or they're less competent than just random old women who have been like,
you're absolutely right. I mean, I belong to two small locals. We get it done, Right. These guys walk in and claim that they are labor relations experts. If they are experts, that means that they know the law. And so if they're not filing, it means that they are choosing not to disclose, which means that they are choosing to remain in the shadows. And there is absolutely no way at this point that any union buster out there doesn't know about the rules. They just don't care about them because no one's brought the hammer down on them like the Department of Labor has on unions. Unions are one of the most transparent, regulated entities in our entire country. And there's a law that says that the union busting industry is supposed to be just as compliant. But again, it just shows you that those in power, those with money, get to play by a different set of rules. But it would be very hard to believe that people that have been union busting for 5, 10, 20 years are not familiar with this legislation or the rules that they need to play by. And we know it because a lot of the non-filers, we've had interactions with them about, like, we need this filed. We know that the Department of Labor, has at some point, especially under the previous administration, done some outreach on this front. So when they say, like, they're not complying, it's either they're lying and intentionally hiding things or they're incredibly incompetent. And sometimes it's both.
Right, exactly. And so, they're supposed to be filing, I think there's is it actually mentioned in the law that, like, the reason for the filing deadlines for the union busters is so that so that employees know before they have an election? Is that reason actually explicit in the law? But I think that the kind of default deadline is 30 days, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously this legislation is old, but so we think we should be upping that. And I think in this day and age, we can have things done digitally and quickly. That said, the law was clear specifically about union busters. This isn't necessarily like all the receipts and everything. This is about that we have been hired to engage in this work and we need to disclose it so workers know who exactly is talking to them. And there can't be a secret campaign against them or lies about who they are. I mean, sometimes these union busters refuse to even say what their name is, or they use aliases, or they lie about that they are actually coming from a federal agency. So yes, Congress was explicit, like, all these are, annual disclosures, except for this one form that the union buster needs to file, and not the moment they land on the ground, the moment that they are engaged for the work. So that gets filed. The Department of Labor is supposed to be publicly available. again, like, an example of all of this is Department of Labor forced implemented a digital system for union compliance, 15 years ago. They just started doing it for union busters 3 years ago. I mean, it is not taken seriously, and we're talking about tens of thousands, if not more, workers that are being negatively impacted by this non-compliance, not to mention the communities as well. Because when this information gets out there in communities, we all know about Starbucks, we all know about Amazon, but when you see that a local employer in your community is willing to spend this amount of money to harass your friends and, colleagues and neighbors, it infuriates people. And it's really important because this is supposed to be not just available for workers, but for the public as well. So labor relations are transparent, but it's one-sided transparency. And it's really starting to, there's absolutely no reason this can't be fixed. That's what's so frustrating.
And so, does the law actually provide for penalties for late or non-disclosure?
Yeah, so if it's found to be intentional, which, we kind of just touched on that a second ago, it's kind of hard to say that it isn't. But there are civil and criminal options that can be pursued, but the Secretary of Labor has to make that decision to actually pursue those. Now, we've seen actions taken against unions. The only thing I've ever seen against an employer is one subpoena. But I mean, imagine that, right? Imagine if the Department of Labor started calling these bad actors and saying, FYI, we have subpoena powers. I wonder how quickly we'd seen some disclosures.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so there are potentials for criminal and civil penalties for non-disclosure or late disclosures. It's just not happening. So that's very frustrating. What do you have off the top of your head some of the biggest union busters, like as far as the ones who are most prolifically late or non-disclosing?
I'll give you an example, right? There's this organ, and I want to be clear, like sometimes they file, sometimes they don't. It sometimes feels like, oh, if we called them out in one of our reports, then we start getting a disclosure the next year from them, right? So I just want to be clear with these examples that it's not necessarily every year, but I'll give you like one example. There's this organization called the Labor Pros. They're based in Florida. They do union busting all over the country, from, public charter schools. We had them on one campaign, to Amazon union busting. I mean, they're everywhere. We did manage to push the Department of Labor through some complaints to get some action on the Labor Pros, because we knew that they were hiding a lot of their disclosures. And one night they submitted, like, it was something like 200 disclosures that they hadn't filed over the last years, right?
Wow.
And that just shows, like, yeah, they don't care. And what was the implication for that? What happened? They filed hundreds of disclosures years after the campaigns, right? That's what's so clear. We have there are plenty of other firms that it really seems like when they feel like it, they're going to file. Again, you can if you do go to our website, you can look at our report that lists out all the firms that still haven't filed anything. You can also compare it to the year before and see which ones are just they just don't care at this point to do it. And it's important that we also note that this industry is growing. It seems like every week we're learning about a new subcontractor, and that's how it usually works. They start working for one of these other union busting firms, and then they spin off their own one day. And this industry is growing. And since we're at a growth point, and also we're at a growth point in interest in organizing, it is all the more important that anyone new to this industry, we make it very clear to them that there are a set of standards. I think everything that they do should be illegal, but,
Right.
in this world we exist in, there are a set of standards that they at least need to play by to balance the playing field a little bit here.
We've had on the program one of these union busters, and I don't know if we would call him a friend of the show, Joe Brock, the liberal union buster. For those of you who don't know, that's how he describes himself, the liberal union buster. Really upset at Sean O'Brien for not endorsing Kamala Harris. He's a very strange sort of politics. He thinks that unions are good where they exist already and they should stay unionized, but any new unions in the private sector should not be formed, and workers in the public sector should form unions, and which is like kind of almost right opposite of most of these people. He thinks public sector unions generally good, private sector unions generally bad. So very kind of strange character. And I didn't ask you to prep this, but do you have off the top of your head, do you know how good he is with filing on time? Like, is he, he's a liberal guy, so surely he's kind of on time with some of this stuff. Do you know off the top of your head if Brock is filing on time regularly?
So this year, Joe Brock did get his paperwork on time. So I did enjoy when he was on your show, and watching the pretzel get made. He's one of these really good examples because he's a former union member, right? And
a
so
former
he goes
president of the Teamsters local in Philadelphia.
Yeah, so he goes in. We have a few of these. They go in and say, I've been in a union. I know what it's like, right? What they don't disclose is why they are no longer in the union. We have one union buster that we've that we've studied, who loves to go in and talk about. They used to be a union member, and they can tell you how bad it is. They don't disclose the fact that they were investigated for embezzling $50,000 from their local union, right? So those are important things. I mean, I don't think Joe Brock goes in and talks about the union election he lost. Maybe he does. Right. I don't know. But and these are sometimes, I will tell you, when it comes to the union buster tactics, these are sometimes the most effective. Like, you have the brash, like old school, like the union buster at Amazon that started screaming homophobic slurs at organizing workers, right? Like, we still have some of these horrific, like, old school thugs. But the ones that I think are the most effective are the ones that come in and say, hey, I've been hired by your boss because they realize that they've messed up, and they just want me here to listen and fix the problem. So what's going on? Oh, Sarah, you say that this is important to you. Write that down. Really, what he's doing is surveillance of who's clearly leaning towards supporting the union, right? And reporting everything back to management. They come in and just say, hey, I'm here to help, right? But what they're really doing is giving biased answers to questions and surveilling workers at the same time and gaining their trust so that they can really find where the weak points are and where the strong points are. It's not the guys that come in there like, with a billy club or something like that. It's the ones that come in there and just, I'm a professional here to like fix things for you. They're not there to fix things. They're there to collect information and divide the workforce from any unity or solidarity.
So what were your recommendations to the OLMS? What are, what sort of things are you recommending that the government change?
Well, one, I think we've already got the roadmap. I mean, I'm not someone that believes in recreating wheels. Hold union busters to the same standards you hold unions to. All of the mechanisms that are in place, whether it's audits or compliance teams or trainings that go on with unions, why are we simply also not doing that same thing for literally, a small percentage compared to the unions? Where, again, we've talked 21,000 unions. We're talking about a few hundred union busting firms. So one, just replicate what the Department of Labor is already doing, but make sure that it is actually enforced and put on union busters as well. We also think that the Department of Labor needs to set aside resources strictly for building a compliance team that is their job is to make sure that these folks who have not been complying with the law for decades, and there's literally a 1984 report that came out, so 41 years ago, that said this is a problem. And here we are 41 years later, and the Department of Labor still hasn't solved this problem. It's not rocket science. We need a compliance team. We need systematic identification. For example, they're supposed to be putting EINs in there. Half of these union busters aren't putting their tax identification in there. Why doesn't the Department of Labor just make that a required form before you press submit, right? Like, this is not rocket science. You also can just put a voluntary compliance program together like you've done with unions. And if they don't engage, then let's start moving to the next step, right? Like, Department of Labor has subpoena powers. They do have the ability to force these companies and these union busters into compliance. So those are our key recommendations. We need dedicated resources, a dedicated team. Again, I'm happy to get deputized by the Department of Labor. I'll pick up the phone and start calling union busters and saying, "Hey, your form's not submitted. We know you're in that workplace. You got to disclose stuff." This isn't incredibly hard, but we do have a culture that has persisted since the implementation of this law. We have a culture of the Department of Labor that thinks that, oh, our only job is to hold unions accountable for transparency laws.
Right. Well, I mean that kind of does go to the as much as there's a lot of good stuff in the LMRDA, and it is probably on net a good thing that unions do have to be so transparent, and that we got the Union Member Bill of Rights and all of this stuff, and that's all good. The LMRDA was not motivated by and large, if you go back and look at and I'm sure you have, and I'm just saying this for the audience. I know that you know this, but if you go back and look at the debates around the LMRDA and the reason that Congress passed it, it was not to make sure there's a level playing field and we want to make sure that unions and employers kind of have the same thing. It was all a bunch of stuff that was dredged up about union thugs, and we got to protect union members from their unions. That's why you have the Union Member Bill of Rights, and like I said, that it's all ultimately, I think most of the stuff in there is good, but the LMRDA was not meant to be a check on employers. It was meant to be a check on unions and to be a part of an anti-union sort of propaganda campaign back then when it was passed. And so that's kind of the legacy of how it happened. And you have there was the Union Members for Democracy, or a Labor Association for Democracy, or something like that was called on to testify in support of the LMRDA at the time, and their president was like, y'all are crazy, all of the people who support this law, but and unions are good, but the recommendations in this law are ultimately kind of generally good. And so, there's a lot of wrestling with that, but that's kind of the legacy of how the LMRDA came about, I think. The OLMS is under the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor is headed right now by Lori Chavez-DeRemer. The Teamsters put in a lot of political capital to whip votes for DeRemer. And the Teamsters are, probably the number one target of these union busters, right? Amazon is probably spending more than any other single company, and it's all basically against the Teamsters. And so, is Chavez-DeRemer on the case? How have you heard back from the OLMS when you gave them these recommendations, or how has that been?
So, I will say that we actually did hear back from OLMS on this report. We share all of our findings with Department of Labor and OLMS. This is not we want to make this very clear because we are hoping that they rectify the issue, right? Mm-hmm. So we share all of this. We did hear back, this is incredibly helpful. Thank you so much. Kind of ends there right now. So what we want to see is some action on that as well. I'm very interested on the point that you're making. Teamsters are the number one target of anti-union persuaders. It's partly because they're organizing like crazy, right? But for example, it's a Teamster campaign in Iowa. that's happening right now, organizing 1,800 nurses where they've already spent millions of dollars. They have a team of 16 labor relations experts harassing nurses all day, every day. Just last week, we filed a litany of complaints with the Department of Labor against the non-disclosure that is happening at this hospital, Unity Point Health in Des Moines, Iowa. We just got those in last week. I will be very interested to see what the Department of Labor does with this information, because to your point, I think it will be very telling. This is pretty black and white, overt non-disclosure, hiding information from, again, almost 2,000 nurses. So I guess my answer is I am hoping to see some movement, especially around some of these campaigns. We're told that they're going to be taking movement on it and start taking this more seriously, but we need to see the proof is in the pudding, right? Like, okay, let's see how soon we actually get disclosures in from there, and the nurses get the information they're absolutely entitled to. Otherwise, we're just going to have to continue to put out the information ourselves. I mean, luckily, I just want to be clear to any listeners on this. Like, if you think you have a union buster in your work site, please contact us. It's contact@laborlab.us. And because since so many of these folks don't play by the rules, we can actually help you identify and collect the information that you're entitled to while the Department of Labor doesn't do their job.
Bob Funk, appreciate your time. Executive Director of LaborLab. You can find more information at laborlab.us. The report is titled Uneven Transparency. Definitely check it out. Lots of really good stuff there. Bob, thank you so much for your time. Anything else that you want to leave our listeners with before we let you go?
No, just thank you so much, and continue the fight. I love, obviously, we love your all show, so keep it up.
Thanks, brother. Talk soon.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, there you go. LaborLab.us, folks. If you have any questions, you want to learn more about that, and definitely let them know if you see any persuaders in your workplace. They were a great help on the Navistar campaign here in Huntsville, getting some information out about them. So,
yeah, there's so many good resources on the LaborLab website. I really do recommend it. Just, bookmark that website. Take some time to look through what they have in terms of resources. You can check out the full report that Jacob was talking with him about, but also there's stuff on, 5 common union busting tactics, how to file an unfair labor practice charge, a simple guide to protected concerted activity, how to start a union the right way. So there's lots of good resources there available. So it's one of those that I recommend, every unionist be familiar with and be willing to share with folks. But also those union curious workers out there who are thinking about organizing. LaborLab is a great resource.
Absolutely. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number if anybody wants to call in. Would love to hear from you. 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We're going to be talking soon to some folk, a fella from the Federal Unionist Network, about some trainings that they're offering. Then we're going to be talking to Luis Leon about some reporting that he's doing. First, Adam, have you been following this UPS strike threat over in Kentucky?
Just a little bit, yeah, just a little bit. So I can share a few things about this. We've reported on tensions with the Teamsters and UPS here recently. There was that big buyout. I don't want to say scandal, but controversy, so to speak. And we've got another reminder here that when workers organize and actually wield real power, that corporations sometimes will actually listen. Because UPS backed off at the 11th hour when the Teamsters mounted a credible coordinated strike threat that was spanning 7 states. And the threat came just before picket lines were set to form early this past week, and the multi-billion-dollar company actually did retreat. General President Sean O'Brien laid it out bluntly. The Teamsters have lost all patience with UPS's ongoing attacks on our members' rights and our contracts. The gloves are off, he says. So there were a lot of issues at play here. In Louisville, the union forced a resolution of longstanding grievances at the Aircraft Maintenance Distribution Center, restoring work to Teamsters Local 89 and Local 2727. In Chicago, Local 705 secured its first contract for administrative and specialist workers and ensured they now earn the top wage for their roles. And there were further settlements rolled in for grievances over seniority and safety at Local 20 in Toledo and Local 455 in Denver. Teamsters General Secretary Treasurer Fred Zuckerman said there's only one thing that UPS cares about, and that's money. Their behavior at the corporate level as of late proves it. Executive bonuses, stock buybacks, these things are far more important to CEO Carol Tomei than the rights and livelihood of the men and women who deliver all those packages. Let this be a warning to UPS that in any state, at any facility, the Teamsters are prepared to fight back against continued abuse of our members. And so I think it's important to highlight that it's not just luck, right? It's not that you can just totally bluff. You have to have strategic organizing, and you have to have a willingness to follow through on strike authorization. There was coordination across multiple states, which meant UPS could face some real consequences. And these real stakes helped change their behavior. And, the Teamsters were very blunt and militant in their messaging around this to make it clear that they were serious. So organized labor is ultimately the only force capable of holding corporations accountable. We know that. Especially in today's era, all these buybacks and the soaring executive pay, the only check and balance we have is through organized labor. And as we mentioned earlier in reference to the Boeing strike in Missouri and Illinois, it's the strike power that is our most important tool that we have to deploy, and that's really, really important. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily even take the strike, but the actual credible strike threat, the ability to organize and the ability to prepare yourself to go on strike. Sometimes that's enough to get the company to back down. It has to be credible. It has to be real, right? Because we run into folks all the time who want to go on strike, who kind of just offhand talk about the need to go on strike. And there's a lot of work that goes into that, a lot of preparation that goes into that. And it's really easy to miscalculate and to lose. And to lose a strike is very devastating. For folks to go on that kind of sacrifice and make that kind of sacrifice and for it not to turn out well can be very crushing to morale. So it's not something you want to do lightly. But kudos to the Teamsters for pulling this off, for getting UPS to back down and offer some concessions. That's important. We saw in their big contract struggle a couple summers ago that they made very credible strike threats. They were doing practice pickets. They were organizing, and it looked like it could have resulted in a strike. And I think you could credit some of the success in that contract to that organizing. Right. And folks can critique the contract and maybe there are things about it they don't love, and that's all fair and good. But they made some significant gains, I think, arguably because they did pull off successful strike threats. Right. So I think that's important, and I think it's really timely because right now we're in a state in this country where labor law is being shredded. The folks who are supposed to enforce labor laws are being understaffed and chased out of the office. It's really bleak out there in terms of like the legal structures that we've established for the last 80, 90 years to set up in this country to, facilitate union organizing. When you're organizing in a campaign right now, that the NLRB may not be able to do a lot for you. Or that the companies are confident that they have an ally in the White House and an ally in the Supreme Court should they have to take it that far. So that means the strike power is that much more important these days. I think for me, I think all of us as unionists need to be discussing how can we strike effectively? How can we prepare ourselves to strike effectively? How can we coordinate strike action more and more? There are, of course, legal limits and restrictions we face on striking. There's bans on secondary strikes, for example, things like that. But frankly, I mean, if the other side is playing fast and loose with the rules and ripping up the rules, we have to be looking at ourselves and really assessing our capacity. Because if we're not in a position where we can take collective action and ultimately take strike action, what leverage do we really have? I think that's really important. So shout out to the Teamsters for having some success there. We've been critical of the administration of the Teamsters, but give credit where it's due. That was some success, and I'm glad to see that. I hope the organizing will continue. It's not just what an international president or a secretary treasurer says or does. It's ultimately rank and file members and the engagement and involvement of rank and file members. That's where our strength comes from. I think all of us across the country, across the South, we need to be talking to our union brothers and sisters and really looking at what would it take for us to go on strike. What does that look like? What do we need to do now to prepare for a future time where we may have to go on strike? What does it look like to go beyond just our own contracts and our own specific workplaces and start looking at broader strike activity across the working class?
Right.
That's not what you asked me. You asked me about the Teamsters and the UPS, but I think we're at that point in this country where we have to be looking at massive strike disruptions in this country to defend ourselves. The working class is under attack from every direction, and if we can't pull off strike activity, I'm very concerned about how we're going to survive and move forward, and not just make things better, but even just defend what we already have.
Speaking of defending what we have, Colin Smalley, president of IFPTE Local 777 at the Corps of Engineers in Chicago, and steering committee member of the Federal Unionist Network, if I'm recalling correctly, is on the line. He's here to talk to us about some trainings that the Federal Unionists Network is putting on. Been on the show multiple times before. Colin, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Jake, it's good to be here.
It's great to have you. You're following your international president. He was on to talk about NASA earlier in the program. You're here to talk about some of the stuff that the fund is doing. Really excited to be talking to you about that. And, it's timely because, obviously, the Trump administration is ripping up contracts at the VA, the EPA, FEMA. And, I heard concerning conversation at my last local union meeting about what happens if or when they do this at the DoD, where most of my, where most of my fellow union members are at. My union local is a DoD local primarily, and so and I heard some talk among the people who were at the meeting, which the people who were at the union meeting is a very select group of folks. There's not very many people come to the union meeting, and there were people at the union meeting who were like, if this happens to us, I mean, are we packing up and going home? And it was really, really concerning stuff for me to hear. And, I chimed in a little bit. I took the floor for a moment and just kind of reminded people about what a union is. Because a union is not a contract. A union is not your employer recognizing you. A union is something different, and these trainings that the Federal Unionists Network are putting together are based on that on a more fundamental understanding of what a union is than about contract enforcement or winning an election or things like that. So before we talk about what the training is, what people are going to be learning in these trainings, can you remind people about fundamentally what is a union?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything you just said. And I work in a DoD agency as well, and so my members and I are worried about the same thing. When are they coming for our contract? We've already been targeted by this executive order, and what I keep telling people, and in my opinion, what is important to keep in mind is that at its root, a union is an association of workers. It's workers who have come together to protect each other, to be stronger together, and to bring their needs and their perspectives to the forefront. Because the boss is always going to have their own things that they're trying to accomplish. There are things that, they're trying to make money in the private sector, in the government, they're trying to execute some particular mission. And oftentimes that can be done, those needs can be met while still meeting the needs of the workers, right? But that's never going to happen if you don't have the workers coming together and working together. And so that's at its heart what a union is. And in the federal sector, it sounds kind of like that's the theme of this show and or this episode at least. In the federal sector for a very long time, for longer than we've had collective bargaining rights and sort of this bureaucratic structure, we had unions. And the workers, there's some really inspiring tales from, maybe the 1800s even, of the railway mail service was a part of the post office. This is before airplanes and even before semi-trucks. They were moving the mail around the country by rail, in a car that was attached onto a freight train or a passenger train. And you'd have postal workers inside these cars sorting mail as they go from one town to the next. And they were the first whistleblowers. They won the first legal protections for federal employees in the Theodore Roosevelt administration. He had put out a real, severe executive order that punished workers for talking to the press, for talking to Congress, for talking just publicly at all about their working conditions. There were people dying of tuberculosis in Chicago, and it was postal workers, federal workers, who raised the alarm about it and how it was spreading and what was going on, and the fact that the city wasn't doing anything to protect its people, and much less the workers, at Chicago Union Station and the Chicago Post Office there. And that case is what won the very first whistleblower protections, which actually survive to this day. 100 years later, federal workers are still protected by the ability to talk to Congress and have that be a legally protected activity, right? So federal workers were unions. They were taking care of each other. They were speaking out for each other. They were doing the things that they needed to do. And I'm not necessarily saying, striking, withholding labor, obviously that kind of thing is not the same equation as it would be in the private sector. But there are things that workers can do collectively in the federal workplace without harming our mission, without harming the taxpayer, without harming our communities, because we are members of our own communities. We are taxpayers. We are, many of us doing public service because we believe in serving our communities. And so at the same time, we can act collectively to meet our needs. And, so to me, that's the role that our unions have, whether the government recognizes us and whether we have a contract with them that, makes it easier to understand what everybody's roles are and how we're going to solve problems together. The contracts make it easier. The system was set up because they got tired of dealing with the unions fighting in every separate way. We're going to fight wages by appealing it to this board. We're going to fight about, discrimination by taking it to this board. We're going to fight about discipline by taking it to this board. And sometimes if we're not happy with that, we're going to take it to court. Well, they didn't want all that. So they came up with this system that we could all work within. Now they want to take that away. We've got the blueprint already.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and just with my union, AFGE, AFGE was founded in 1932. My local of AFGE in Huntsville, Alabama, was founded in the 50s. Like, every time I walk into my union hall, I see the charter, and I see the 12 charter members who created the union in, like, I think it was 1953. The National Federation of Federal Employees was founded in 1917. The National Association of Letter Carriers was founded in 1889. And here in Huntsville, Alabama, the NALC local was founded in the early 1900s. And the first time that federal unions got even a semblance of collective bargaining rights was President Kennedy's executive order in 1962. And then we got a law standardizing collective bargaining rights in like the 70s. I think it was 1978. And so, you know, I mean, literally for the majority of the existence of so many federal employee unions, we have not had the legal right to a union. We have not had our boss recognizing us as a union. We have not had contracts with our boss, and yet we have still been there. And so, you know, I took up like a pretty, you know, I went on a little bit of a rant in my last union meeting, like telling people all of this, because it's so important. Because like, the union is not a contract. The union is not our, you know, the boss recognizing us. The union is us. The union is workers coming together to make our workplaces better. And so that is, and you know, in many cases, to fight for the mission of the agency. You know, I mean, if you wanted to make a lot of money, you're not going to work for the federal government. You're going to go and do something else. And so a lot of times people are attached to the mission of the agency that they work for. And so they want to fight for the mission of the agency too. And so that is what the Federal Unionists Network's trainings that are coming up, that's what they are based on. And they call this, you know, the unionism that kind of doesn't have an emphasis on the contract or recognition. There's a lot of different names for it: solidarity unionism, pre-majority unionism, things like that. Can you explain a little bit about kind of, you know, we just went over, you know, what a union is, but what does it mean to act like a union in a situation where you don't have recognition and you don't have a contract?
So to me, I like to go back to the toolbox analogy, right? Where you've got a toolbox, it's got a bunch of different things in it. Some of those may be old rusty tools that your grandpa handed down to you, and some of them may be, you know, the shiny new thing that you caught your eye last time you were at the hardware store. But they've all got a different job to do, and sometimes you can do things with more than one tool. And so, you know, if I've got a contract and I can file a grievance through that negotiated grievance procedure, that can really make it to where one steward, let's say, has the force of the Federal Labor Relations Authority behind them. So if management just blows off the grievance process, we can go to arbitration. And if management blows off arbitration, we can go to the FLRA. And we can, you know, if the FLRA blows us off, we can go to court, right? So we've got this system, and one or two people can shepherd a case through that process. You know, a union negotiating team of a few people can go negotiate, you know, demand a bargain over a change in working conditions, and then sit down at the negotiating table and fight for what the members want. When you have that system, you can get by with a few people making a big difference, you know, maybe punching above their weight a little, right? But there are still tools in our toolbox to achieve those same outcomes, even if we don't have the tool of the contract and sitting down at the bargaining table. We have the ability to act collectively. And that right, you know, that ability, that's way deeper than the federal labor statute, the law that Congress passed in the 70s. This is going back to the Bill of Rights, right? These are some of our natural rights to act collectively. And so what we can do is, let's say the boss has wronged somebody and we don't have a grievance process by which we can go, you know, make management make it right by holding them accountable with an arbitrator, for instance. Instead, what happens if we act collectively and we draw attention to this injustice, and we draw attention. I remember a story in Labor Notes about a federal union in New York, one of my sister locals in IFPTE, who's had a member who was being denied parental leave. She was expecting a kid pretty soon, and was trying to get everything in order, and the boss was being a real jerk. And frankly, everybody got together, they met about and talked about what to do, and they decided they needed to go approach the boss together and have this group of people using their voice, their collective voice, to say, this is wrong, you need to treat her with respect. And that's what happened. They approved the leave, and things were set back the way they ought to be. And it didn't use that union's contract. It didn't use their grievance procedure. It didn't use the FLRA or courts or anything else. It was just people working collectively to do what's right. And so this is really what we're getting at, is this idea that, yes, it's still good to have a contract, and it's still good to have the legal rights and help enforcing them and things like that. But when we turn toward organizing together, and when we turn toward workers supporting each other, we still have every bit of our effectiveness as a fighting union.
Right, exactly. And those are going to be some of the lessons that y'all are going to be talking about with participants of this training. Are there any other lessons that you can give us in just a couple of minutes? I know that thinking about how to act collectively and protect yourselves and all of this. It's there's a lot that's going to be going into it. But is there any other lessons that you think that you could preview for us before we let you plug everything?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually have a blog post on the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee's website. It's been reprinted at Labor Notes, and there I outline a number of things that workers can do, even still using some of their legal rights, the things that are in regulations, and even a lot of times still on the clock. One of the big downsides to losing a CBA in the federal sector is going to be that all the union reps are no longer, they're either going to have to take leave or do work off the clock and volunteer and that kind of thing. And that has the potential to have a lot of people walk away from it. But you can still do safety inspections on the clock as a union rep or as a representative of employees. You can still represent employees who have been discriminated against or who are asking for reasonable accommodations to do their job. Even though they have a disability, that can all be done on the clock as a representative, and the employees have a right to representatives of their choice, which can be their union. And so those are a couple of examples. There's a bunch more. If you're shorted on your overtime pay, or you have an injury at work and you're trying to go through the workers' compensation system, you have rights outside of your union contract to have a representative by your side and help you navigate those systems at the times that you need help the most. Same with discipline. And so in many of these things that we think as bread and butter roles for a union, your union will still be there for you, and you can still be there for other people through your union. And in many cases, do it on the clock with legal support behind you. But then there's also, what I was just talking about with collective action that goes even beyond that. And I think right now we're looking at a time where what we need, in my opinion, more than almost anything is creativity and an open mind to think about, what are the problems that we're encountering at work and what can we do together to solve them?
Right. No, that's great. The title of the article in Labor Notes is How Federal Workers Without a Union Can Still Act Like a Union. You can Google that. It'll come up. We have also got a link to it in the YouTube chat, and the training is by the Federal Unionists Network. The title of the training is How to Be a Union No Matter What the Boss Says. And it's going to start on Monday at 7 p.m. Central Time. We've also got a link to that in the chat as well. We'll put a link to that in the podcast notes and everything. So check that out. Make sure you attend. Is there anything else about this training that you want to make sure you leave people with before we let you go?
Mostly just that, we are going to have a few folks from some of the most acutely affected unions who just lost their contracts, at least for now, the Veterans Administration, the EPA. So, if you're a worker at one of those agencies, we really want to have you on. We want to have you getting an idea of some of the things that you could be thinking about together with your colleagues, and then take that back to your union. But I also want to call anybody else who, whether they're a federal worker, whether they already have a union and a contract and they're worried about losing it, or maybe they're trying to form a union in their workplace and they don't know what the path ahead is when it comes to whether they're going to get a vote or things like that. With all this uncertainty, I think there's going to be a little something in this webinar for everybody. And so we'd really love to see everybody come out and bring some of these ideas back and start talking with each other to figure out how you're going to put it into action.
All right, great. Colin Smalley, steering committee member for the Federal Unionists Network and president of IFPTE Local 777 in Chicago. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, there you go. Folks, if you're a federal employee, you definitely want to check that training out. And you want to, get involved with the Federal Unionists Network. They're doing lots of good stuff.
And let me add also, if you are a local or state government employee in the South, for example, this would be very relevant to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've had United Campus Workers on the show a few times. They are using a similar pre-majority solidarity unionism kind of model because higher education employees in the state of Alabama are not given collective bargaining rights or union recognition. So, and even at the K-12 level in education here in Alabama, they have meet and confer with what they call the majority employee organization, but that's it. So these lessons are very relevant, and even in those conditions, you can organize and you can win for working people.
Absolutely. Really excited for our next guest and the last segment that we're going to be doing today on the program. Luis Leon is assistant editor and organizer at LaborNotes, also a columnist for In These Time, and probably his most impressive title is a repeat guest on the Valley Labor Report. Luis, welcome back to the program. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate the work that you're doing. You've got some really great reporting about a strike going on at Mauser. Can you tell us what does Mauser do as a company, and what's going on with the strike there by workers who are organized with the Teamsters Union?
Yeah, so Teamsters out of Local 705 that work at Mauser, where they recondition steel drums, have been on strike since June 9th, so over 2 months, and they're really in a tough fight. No one has crossed the picket line. They're fighting. They earn about $20 an hour. They're fighting, to boost their wages to $23, $25 an hour. The company's being really intransigent on moving on any of the bargaining issues, including requiring any ICE agents that show up on company property to come onto the property with a judicial warrant signed by a judge. So this is, really important because there have been a number of raids in the community where the facility is located. People have literally been kidnapped. People don't, masked agents have just shown up and snatch people, from workplaces, from streets. So the workers are really concerned. The majority of the workers are Latino, 10% African American, And, like has happened since the decimation of manufacturing in this country, many of these jobs have become very low paying. So I think last time I was on the program, I talked briefly about workers in Kentucky who were working at a GE plant, and they themselves were earning about $20 an hour. So I think that the meaning of a collective bargaining agreement has just been degraded over time. And, you just had a federal worker on talking about the cancellation of the federal union contract. So right now we are really in a like the labor movement is facing the darkest hour in our history, where this kind of harkens back to like the 1880s, so
Right.
so this is a really pivotal fight, and it's part of this larger employer offensive that unions are facing nationwide. But the local is doing a really good job. Workers are staying strong and they're fighting back, but they have a tough fight on their hands.
Your most recent article about this is in These Times. The title is Dispatch from the Employer Offensive, Mauser Teamsters Strike Back. And you do a really great job of contextualizing this fight within a lot of broader things that are happening. You mentioned the broader attack on the labor movement, particularly with the with federal employee unions, and also the immigration politics. You mentioned in the article that something like 90% of workers at this plant are Latino, and so one of the things that they are wanting in this in their contract is you mentioned making it mandatory that any ICE agent that is voluntarily let onto the property by the employer has to have a judicial warrant. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that and how that demand came up and how that sort of ties back to some of the broader immigration politics that are going on right now?
Yeah, so yeah, I think that demand came about just based on what's happening locally in Chicago and just what's happening nationwide. Like people are seeing the way in which employers are using this climate of fear. There's a common saying that cruelty is the point. I don't think cruelty is necessarily the point. I think fear is the point because what these employers want to do is use this larger context, anti-immigrant backlash that's sponsored and being fomented by the Trump administration to basically chill organizing. They want to be able to have workers fearing for their employment so that they can push through sellout contracts, degrade working conditions. That's all to their benefit, right? So Trump is doing the employer's bidding right now by creating this climate of fear. So we have seen both citizen and non-citizen workers just based on the way that they look, because there's no other way that you can do mass deportation without racially profiling people. So these workers were concerned about that, and they wanted to have some language to protect themselves from the most flagrant abuses. It must be said that at this point, the Trump administration is acting with total impunity. Even in cases where communities have rallied in defense of workers, we have yet to see an example where a raid has been stopped. So this is just, protection. This is just something, it's language. Ultimately, it helps in terms of what the union is fighting for, and it signals to the workers that the employer is not going to cooperate within the parameters of the law. Because one of the things that one of the workers I interviewed told me, Arturo Landa, was that the company, in bargaining said, well, we're not going to break the law. He said, well, we're not asking you to break the law. We're just asking you to ask for this extra thing, so that if they want to gain access, they have to go through this other hoop. It doesn't mean that it's going to ultimately stop them. The only thing that will ultimately stop them is if we build a movement that's strong enough to fight back and beat back, these abuses. Like there's complete impunity, no respect for the rule of law. This is a lawless administration, and workers know that. They're not naive. So I think that's the broader context in which this is happening. And the fact that the employer cannot even grant that concession is indicative of just how empowered and emboldened employers feel in this moment.
You have a lot of interview. You spoke to a lot of the workers involved in this strike for this piece, and it was nice to see. You could see that there was some sense of like community being developed on the picket line, as usually happens. It's common that people are brought together when they go out on strike. Can you talk to us about that? Because I think it's important to have a little bit of hope, even as so much of this story is really, really bleak. There have been some bright spots in it, right?
No, absolutely. I think, yeah, no, I think workers have definitely, maintained a strong picket line. No one has crossed the picket line. And some of these workers, this is the first time that they've been on strike. They had a do nothing union before, and the Teamsters, they voted unanimously in 2019 to join the Teamsters, and the Teamsters are going to bat, with them, supporting them, and workers talk to me about how before they go into bargaining, the team meets them at 5 in the morning. They start their day at the picket line, and then they go in to bargain with management. And the next day they come back and they give some updates about what's happening. Many of these workers are monolingual Spanish speakers, so the updates are given in Spanish and English. So, they've really built camaraderie on the picket line. And taking into account what I just said about the broader political, context that we're in and what's happening locally in Chicago, where Trump has, singled out Democratic-led cities, for these kinds of demonstrations of federal abuse and worker abuse. The mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, was on the picket line, standing with the workers. And I think they've gotten support not only from like local elected officials, but also from, people like Bernie Sanders, who wrote a letter in July to the company CEO, demanding, that they bargain with their workers. So I think they have a lot of community support. They have support among each other, and that's definitely inspiring, because that's what we need in this moment. We need to stick together. And the fact that some of the workers are some of the most vulnerable people, you would think like, hey, they they might be justified to cross, right? Because another thing that the company has done to try to break their spirit, to crush their morale, is the company has been sending them messages and letters telling them that a plant that was represented by the Teamsters, Local 117 in Seattle, not only, were the workers there locked out, but the plant eventually shuttered. So they said, look what happened to them. If you don't want this to happen to you, tell the Teamsters to bargain. So they are just breaking the law in order to destroy the unity that they're seeing on this picket line. But they haven't succeeded. Workers remain undaunted, and they're staying strong on the picket line.
Right. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson was also on the picket line just a couple of days ago. And so it's great to see the support for these workers. It's great to see these workers standing up for themselves, despite the fact that, like you said, they're, some of the most vulnerable people in this moment right now. And it is great to see the Teamsters standing up for this local, including, by all accounts, it seems like the International. I think that Sean O'Brien himself has been on this picket line before. And so, how does and how do you think that members are handling that tension of, like, it seems like the International is supporting these workers, including in their demands to put a check on ICE, even as Sean O'Brien is really playing footsie with the administration in a broader sense?
That's a good question. I posed it to the workers and some of the union folks out of Local 705. I mean, I think the workers, they responded that they were focused on their strike, and, that makes sense. Like, I respect that. And, I spoke to a business agent, and, he also focused on just like what unions are supposed to do. They're supposed to represent all workers, so they're doing due diligence as is their responsibility as a union. So I think people, they decline to comment, but I can editorialize on what I think about it. But yeah, I mean, I think it's in the labor movement's darkest hour. Sean O'Brien has chosen to realign the Teamsters with Donald Trump, the union buster in chief. So even though the Teamsters, as an organization has a history of corruption, it's a repressive institution, and people are very careful to dissent, from Sean O'Brien, specifically, publicly. I was seeing that after a political article came out and someone criticized him, this guy was actually on Facebook, responding to a former rank and file Teamsters who's since retired, so that gives you a sense of how closely these folks are like monitoring any kind of dissent or any kind of criticism that comes their way. So yeah, I mean, I think contradictions are part of life. Contradictions are part of any political organization, and unions are inherently political. But it must be said that we are right now in a crisis. We have unions on paper, but unions are not really meeting the moment. And like, this is what we are facing is devastating. And for a union president, to play games with the livelihoods of millions of workers, of the millions of members represented by unions, both organized workers and unorganized workers, is not only political malpractice, it is disgraceful. It is scab behavior, and it's unforgivable. So Sean O'Brien is a disgrace. And I think that there was a moment in time where people were hopeful that he went on a tour with Sarah Nelson, with Bernie Sanders, and he was talking the class struggle rhetoric. People were like, okay, maybe this guy is not the thug we thought he was, but he has regressed to the mean. He has gone back to what he always was, out of Teamsters Local 25, and they're it's having real consequences. So I'll stop there, and I can add more in terms of my thoughts. But I think that what's happening right now, the unions are combat institutions. What the workers at Mauser are doing is demonstrated that they can enforce a picket line, that there's discipline and workers are not going to cross and they're going to stick together. There has to be a political picket line when it comes to opposition to the Trump administration. And Sean O'Brien is crossing that picket line.
In addition to writing for Labor Notes and In These Times, you have a Substack called Lower Frequencies where you wrote about this, specifically about Sean O'Brien's kind of kowtowing to MAGA. The title of the article is Teamsters Under Sean O'Brien Go Gaga for MAGA Amid Employer Offensive. And just staying on the immigration stuff, I don't have this clip pulled, but I do have a few clips from his appearance on Barry Weiss's podcast recently. And they talk a little bit about immigration. And he even mentions how when he was organizing at Local 25 in the early 2000s, whenever they would go and organize an employer that primarily employed Hispanic and Latino workers, that when they started thinking about organizing, the employer would think about calling ICE. And he specifically pointed that out as a bad thing. And so it's so kind of, and so he's recognizing in that conversation, at least in part of it, that ICE is used as a tool of the boss to discipline employees, that bosses don't face any repercussions for violating this country's immigration laws, and all of the repercussions are thrown onto workers. And he's supporting these, he's supporting this local that's asking for some pretty explicit protections from ICE, and yet, again, he's playing footsie with the Trump administration and acting like this is kind of not a super big deal, and it's confusing, just even on the immigration thing, how you could be, how you could have the sense to recognize, as he clearly does, that ICE is a tool of the boss while still supporting an administration that is going to expand ICE beyond every other law enforcement agency in the country. I mean, we are really just not ready for the number of absolute freaks that are going to be given a license to kill. It's just, and he's not grappling with that publicly, at least at all.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think if you go back and you read, comments that he's made to the press when he was at Local 25, yeah, I mean, you can find pro-immigrant, statements here and there. I mean, I think he also sometimes, he thinks, I think in his mind, I would imagine that he thinks he's playing his cards right, that he has to deal with the Trump administration and he's going to curry favor to benefit the Teamsters. I think that's the rational idea that he has in his head to justify what he's doing. So he knows that he can only push so far before Trump, basically comes out and punishes him, right? So he's captive to that world because he's chosen to align with Trump. When he spoke at the Republican National Convention in 2024 in Milwaukee, it was a de facto endorsement of the Republican Party. He said, we're exploring our options, but right-wing members in the union use that, as justification to say, you see, our president agrees with us. And he did irreparable damage. Because we have seen we knew what Trump was going to do if he was reelected, and we're living the consequences of that.
And on the Trump thing, just generally, we've been talking about the immigration stuff, but on Trump generally, I mean, there's a Facebook post that I think is still up. I don't think he's deleted it, from 2018, where he is attacking Hoffa Jr. for not being anti-Trump enough. And like Hoffa Jr., as much as maybe people would have said during Trump 1 that Hoffa Jr. was, he kind of played his cards a little close to the chest. I mean, he was nowhere near the amount of footsie that O'Brien is playing. And it's so funny going back and reading that post from 2018 where Sean O'Brien is like, saying Hoffa Jr. is being derelict in his duty for not calling out the Trump administration more harshly and for not making it clear to the members who is on the side of working people. and it's like, he's so much worse this time. Like, it's so much freaking worse. And you're going in the opposite direction. It's bananas. And, a Politico report came out the other day. You mentioned this in your article. The Teamsters are giving like tens of thousands of dollars to frontline Republicans. And I'm interested in what, that, and the Politico piece kind of frames this as a solidification of the more performative overtures that Sean O'Brien has been making to the Republicans. And, one of the Republicans on that list is Brian Fitzpatrick. Brian Fitzpatrick is like basically one of the only Republicans who can genuinely have at least a claim to being pro-labor. He's spoken at AFGE conventions that I've been at before, right? And so, being a Republican that supports public sector unions, that's kind of unique. And the Teamsters have donated to like a couple of dozen frontline Republicans. And I think you've looked into this a little bit. Are these Fitzpatrick clones, or are these more just like normal I hate working people Republicans that they're donating to?
Yeah, I think there's two answers to that question, right? So one thing to just kind of throw into sharp relief is that we are talking about a Republican Party that has been remade in Trump's image, right? So you cannot be a Republican today and not be in alignment with Trump. So I didn't go down through the list of every single name on there, but there's one person that stood out because I saw a comment about him with from one of my friends on social media that shared the article, and it's Tom Barrett from Michigan, who allegedly attempted to disenfranchise black voters by putting an ad in black papers with the wrong election date. So here's who Sean O'Brien,
wow,
is supporting, right? So let's use that as a counterpoint to the pro act, Republican that's on that list, right? Here we have someone who was allegedly, who allegedly attempted to disenfranchise black voters, right, in Michigan. So that's, I think, when there was a time where Sean O'Brien was trying to triangulate. He was trying to be a populist, right? He was trying to criticize Chuck Schumer's daughter for being a lobbyist. He was criticizing Kamala Harris for being out of touch elitist. And that's all fair game. We know that the Democrats are worthy of criticism. And we know that they have also betrayed the labor movement. There's no doubt about that. You're not going to find me going to bat. But Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have not canceled, or were not intending to cancel, or trying to destroy labor unions, right? So I think the context matters, right? Like I'm not going to say that we need to return to the status quo of before Trump, because what we can say about that world is that we had an economic dictatorship of the employers, but we still had some political democracy. We are in an authoritarian moment right now. So given the stakes, given that, how is a representative of organized labor supposed to carry, their responsibilities as a labor leader in that political moment? What do they owe their membership? What are their responsibilities and obligations to the broader labor movement? So what Sean O'Brien did by making not Sean O'Brien, but the Political Action Committee of the Teamsters, what the PAC did by making those contributions is it contributed to the employer's designs to disorganize the working class. The battle lines have been drawn. And as I said earlier, Sean O'Brien has chosen to cross those lines, right? So when he goes on Barry Weiss's show, when he talks to Tucker Carlson, all those overtures, what they all add up to is that Republicans since the New Deal have wanted to destroy labor unions because they were a check on their power. So Sean O'Brien is doing their bidding by stoking divisions in the labor movement across lines of immigration, lines of race, inflaming the culture war in terms of his macho posturing. And more significantly of all, what he did in that in that podcast with Barry Weiss, is he tried to undercut the most credible opposition that we have against Trump. Right. Bernie Sanders has been a standard bearer for the labor movement, right? While older people like Bernie in their 80s do calisthenics at the gym to strengthen those bones, he's been strengthening those bones by pounding the pavement in picket lines, including picket lines thrown up by the Teamsters, right?
Yes.
So if you are a right-wing ideologue that is hell-bent on destroying the labor movement, you have a couple of tactics at your disposal. One is you peel people from your opposing bloc and bring them over to your side to undermine and divide them. So when Sean O'Brien goes out and attacks the opposition to Trump that Bernie Sanders is rallying nationwide. He is doing favors for Republicans and union busters. That's what he's doing because Bernie Sanders and AOC have been touring the country, drawing tens of thousands to their anti-oligarchy tours. And this is what we need. We need to fight back.
Yeah, well,
so why would Sean O'Brien undermine that?
Yeah, it does not make sense, and we do have that clip, and I want to play it. But before we do that, you mentioned Bernie and AOC's fighting oligarchy tours. He also contributed to this, fake BS about them flying private jets, like as if they were doing it for luxury or that makes them fake socialists or whatever. And it's just. They were speaking to tens of thousands of people in multiple states in like 1 or 2 days, and that's just the way that you have to do that when you're doing so many events. In the idea that he would participate in that when, frankly, I mean, if we want to participate in that, his salary is like double Bernie Sanders's, right? I mean, if we want to play that game, like we can play it, but it's an effing stupid game. It is a stupid game to play. And again, it's like, why would you do that? Who benefits from that? But let's play this clip 5 where he talks about Bernie Sanders, again, on right-wing freak Barry Weiss's podcast.
Let's talk about Bernie Sanders for a second, because
He doesn't talk to me anymore.
Why?
I don't know.
When did he stop talking to you?
Right after I spoke at the RNC.
Did you used to talk to him a lot?
All the time. I did rallies with him around the country.
And then what happened? Just went totally silent?
Just whenever I think he looks at it as a betrayal of not endorsing the Democratic Party. He's never said that, but his whole attitude and access has completely changed towards us. I mean, we called him last week, or my staff called him last week because we're working bipartisan on this bill for the FASTA labor standards contract, which is basically a thinner version of the PRO Act.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's got a problem with it, and the staff was not too nice to my staff. So it's like, we're only as good to people when we're carrying their water, but I guess, that doesn't matter. I mean, look, I like the guy, I have respect for him. I saw him on Joe Rogan. I don't know. I mean, this is the problem with politics. People take things too personal. And when you don't go along to get along because you're actually, listening to people you represent and they don't talk to you anymore, that's the problem. It's fine.
Okay, so I just want to, I have a few things that I want to say, and then Luis, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on that. I think you already gave some of them, but you may have more. First off, maybe or maybe not Bernie Sanders responds directly to Sean O'Brien's texts, but the implication, he said, our access has diminished, is non-existent. He used some phrase like that. Since I spoke at the RNC. If he is using, again, the implication is that our means the Teamsters, not just me, Sean O'Brien, as Bernie Sanders' friend. He doesn't call me back anymore, and it hurts my feelings. That is not the implication. The implication is that Bernie Sanders is no longer there for the Teamsters, for his members. That is the clear implication that a listener would receive from those comments. And that, the thoughts that Sean O'Brien put in listeners' heads with his words, the thoughts that people are thinking when they hear that is a lie. It is not true that Bernie Sanders has not been there for the Teamsters. And when I saw this, I was so pissed off because I knew, I follow politics, I follow Bernie Sanders, I follow Sean O'Brien, I follow the Teamsters, and I know that that Bernie Sanders is doing a lot for the Teamsters. And so I just Googled, I was like, how many things can I find in 120 seconds that Bernie Sanders has done not for unions, not for working people, not for, this group or that group, for the Teamsters specifically. And again, I found this in hundreds of seconds on Google. Sean O'Brien spoke at the RNC on July 15th, 2024. Since then, Bernie Sanders spoke at a Teamsters convention on July 29th. Literally 2 weeks after he spoke at the RNC, Bernie Sanders was at a Teamsters convention, the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen. He walked a Teamsters picket line in October of that year at the Marathon's Detroit refinery. He produced a report using the powerful U.S. Senate Health, Education and Labor Committee, produced a report on worker abuse at Amazon, specifically bolstering the Teamsters cause for unionization at Amazon. And he supported the Amazon worker strike in December, which Sean O'Brien at another point in the interview specifically said that nobody helped him out with. And Bernie Sanders specifically did that. And then you pointed out, Luis, and we mentioned this earlier in the program, that just last week, Senator Bernie Sanders supported striking Teamsters at Mauser in Chicago. Or no, not last week, July 14th, so a few weeks ago. But the strike that we were just talking about. And so it's like, that is just such a blatant lie. It's like, why would he do that? Why would he do that? And then, he's talking about the Faster Labor Standards Act. If that passed, just Josh Hawley's PRO Act light bill, if that passed, it would probably be better than the status quo. Maybe. That's fine. But again, it's not gonna pass. And so, what is it's a political thing, kind of just like the PRO Act. And so, I can understand why Bernie would be reticent to spend his time on it and put his name on it as a co-sponsor. If it came up for a vote, the idea that Bernie Sanders wouldn't vote for it, I think is silly. And is, again, why is Bernie Sanders saying that? And then I just want to point out the last thing, and then I want to go to you for your reaction, Luis. This idea that, people take things too personally. People take things too personally when it comes to politics. The idea that Sean O'Brien is saying that is so ridiculous, because I know how he has treated a member of his own union, Rick Smith, and how he has treated the Rick Smith Show. Rick Smith is a working Teamster, a short haul truck driver, I think is what they call it. I don't know. He works for some truck driving company. 30 years he has been a member of the Teamsters Union, and for 20 of those years, or some crazy long amount of time, he has had a daily political talk radio program that is now on 50 stations nationwide. He is in the top 100 talkers for the Talkers magazine. It's a industry thing. Talk radio. He is like one of 5 in the top 100 talkers nationwide that is not a right-wing freak. He's on the radio in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, places that are really important politically. And because Rick Smith had some light criticism, and it was genuinely light when it started off. He was like, I don't agree. I think maybe it's bad, actually, that you're playing footsie with Donald Trump. But I still like your leadership, Mr. O'Brien. I think you're doing great stuff for the union. I think this is a really bad thing. And Sean O'Brien, the Teamsters International, was a longtime sponsor of the Rick Smith Show. They stopped being a sponsor. And in addition to that, Sean O'Brien has been going around and strong-arming locals that sponsor the Rick Smith Show and telling them not to sponsor the Rick Smith Show because he disagrees with the dear leader within the Teamsters. And it's just like, talk about personal, right? He barely even talks about Teamsters internal politics on his show. And the idea that you would purposely try to cripple in a really genuinely, I think, an important institution for, pro-labor politics in this country, because he criticized you a couple of times, and then the idea that, and this is like a theme of his, that he goes around and he talks about, why can't people just get along even though they disagree? And it's like, yeah, what the fuck? It's crazy. I don't understand. So anyway, I had a lot to say there, but interested if you had any thoughts about any of that, Luis.
No, I think the way that I interpret what you're describing is, like how Trump has been described as his speaking style has been described as the weave. I think O'Brien is kind of playing like a similar game with us, right? He's sprinkling into his aggrieved complaints or these displays of aggrievement. Like nobody's talking to me. I'm now on the outs. Um, he's using the kind of language like go along to get along, right? Those are things that critics of the Democrats have used, in the past to kind of describe transactional politics, right? So he sprinkles some of these comments in there because there's a kernel of truth to them, right? But ultimately, he's also distorting what is happening. So I think what you described, in terms of all the different ways in which Bernie Sanders has supported the Teamsters organization, not Sean O'Brien, the supreme leader, but the organization of 1.3 million organized union members, I think is kind of cuts through the bullshit, right? But I think that there is something though about what Sean O'Brien is saying that I think it's important to learn from, right? So Sean O'Brien is attempting to talk about labor politics in a variety of media spaces. That's good. I think more labor leaders should have podcasts. More labor leaders should go and talk on Fox News, but they should be talking about pro worker, policies that build the working class. Um, Talking about a national, working class movement, not just the sectional interests of my members, not showing up with Teamsters versus everybody.
God, I hate that.
Unifying the ranks because we need that. So I mentioned earlier how we are facing, one of the biggest challenges since in 100 years of the labor movement's existence, right? And right now we are failing to kind of rally around a comprehensive fight back to Trump. It would be great if we had national leaders of our unions going out there and talking, and giving their perspective on like what do we need, in this country in order for the people that voted for Trump because they felt left behind, what will actually address those real grievances and concerns. People angry over the devastation of free trade agreements. Like, yeah, we should have people out there talking about how do we have a class first politics, right? So Sean O'Brien is doing something that I think labor leaders should take note of. He's talking. The problem is that is all boss talk. That's what he's talking. He's not talking as a trade union leader. He's talking as, a mouthpiece for the Trump administration. One thing that I would add to the list of things that you were listing is that when Trump and Elon Musk had their spat, Sean O'Brien took time out of his day to weigh in. So this is a man who's a surrogate for a union buster.
Right. Yeah, and there were a couple other clips that I pulled, but we're going a little bit long, so I just want to play. I want to play one more, and it's a little bit of a longer one. But this is where he continues his assault on the most pro-labor politicians that we have in this country, and it's so I don't understand. It's really difficult to comprehend. Let's play clip 6.
And most of the New York unions, I think almost all of them, have endorsed a socialist with many wild views that we don't need to get into in this conversation. I've covered them extensively, but they've endorsed Zohran Mamdani. What does that mean?
Well, I think again, it's just culturally, that's the direction the Democratic parties went in, and New York City is definitely dug in on that same platform.
And most of the New York unions, I think almost all of them, have endorsed a socialist with many wild views that we don't need to get into in this conversation. I've covered them extensively.
Mondami, don't forget when Cuomo was in there, there was a lot that went with Cuomo. And then you just recently seen the cops and firemen go with Adams because of the defund the police stuff, you know? So I don't know. I mean, AOC? No, absolutely not.
Why absolutely not?
Oh, because she's, you know, she's, again, another social justice warrior. You know, she's personally called me out. I've never met the woman in my life. But, you know, she just doesn't, you know, and if you look at how they voted in her district, I mean, I would spend the majority of my time in my district identifying what my people need instead of, you know, trying to put myself on the ballot for 2028.
But these are people, AOC, Mamdani, we can name a few others, who are, maybe you would say they're just cosplaying as like pro-labor politicians. Like they're saying all the things, like we stand up for working people. That's their whole platform. Why do you say that's bullshit?
But do they though? It's bullshit because I'll tell you why. This last election, Joe Biden walked a picket line with the UAW. Awesome, he should. I've had 250 strikes in 3 years. The only politician that has walked one of my picket lines has been Josh Hawley. And
Okay,
recently
can we pause it right there? I mean,
the whole congressional.
That is such a, that's crazy to say. I mean, how does he justify himself saying that, Luis? Have we lost Luis?
Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, so I couldn't hear the clip that you were playing. So can you remind me of what section that was?
Yeah, sorry about that. That was where he said that the only person who has walked a Teamsters picket line since he has been in office was Josh Hawley.
Wow. That's really, there's something that Bernie did when there were these oil workers in Michigan that went out on strike. And, it was a really brutal strike. And, they didn't have much support. It was a small local. A lot of the members were actually featured in a PBS special for their vocal support of Trump. And Bernie showed up and, and walked that picket line. So, I mean, once again, there are, in Sean O'Brien's mind, everyone has a price and everyone can be bought and no one has real convictions. So everything is transactional. I think Sean envies Trump's reality TV fame. So he's putting on some kind of performance, to be the maverick, to be the person that breaks ranks from all these other, labor leaders. But in reality, I think what he's doing is foolish. And I think it's not only foolish, it's dangerous to kind of sow these divisions. I go back to that tactic. When we do Secrets of a Successful Organizer and we use sometimes a grid that kind of talks about how the boss keeps us divided. And if you go and look at that grid, I think you can play bingo every time Sean O'Brien does one of the boss tactics on it, because what he's doing is generating confusion, division, giving people a sense of hopelessness that, for a very long time, Republicans have argued that labor unions are just one more interest group. Sean O'Brien is behaving as though the labor movement is an interest group. And he thinks that by being close to Trump, he's going to do right by Teamster members. As the Mauser strike shows, Teamster members are themselves being targeted by this administration. If you take into account that in grocery, in some of these manufacturing units, you have a lot of immigrant workers that are Teamsters. So it is not only a dereliction of duty, it is a disgrace what this man is doing. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, and I think we're having a little bit of a problem with the clip, and so the last thing that I wanted to play was towards the end of that clip, where they play lightning round. Give me one word reaction to these names, and she says AOC, and he says great bartender, and it's like that's that is so like. It feels a little sexist, but more than that, it's like classist, right? Because the joke there is that a bartender is not an important person, and that's kind of what AOC is just like a bartender, and that's like to be looked down upon. And it's a really gross attitude for a labor leader to have. And so, I don't know that I've got much else to say about his appearance on Barry Weiss, but I mean, a lot of this stuff is repeated in in all of his other interviews that he's been doing with these people and the interviews that he's had with these people, and it's so frustrating to see because I, like so many people, have had a lot of. I had a lot of hope for Sean O'Brien, and it is really dispiriting to see him taking this road.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the last thought that I'll share is that is a really depressing thought. Is that, both you and I, and maybe, some of the pro-union folks that listen to your show, maybe the people that hate listen to your show might be a different story. But one of the things that is important to acknowledge is that Sean O'Brien still retains a lot of support within the union. One of the good things that Sean O'Brien does, to his credit, is that he does, through a combination of carrots and sticks, he has built an alliance with various locals. So he's going to be the Teamster president in 2026.
Right.
Richard Hooker is running as well, and maybe other people will throw their hat in the ring. But the reality is that Sean O'Brien has consolidated power in the Teamsters, and he is steering the organization in a very reactionary, anti-worker direction. And the past couple of years, to your point about the bartending comment, have kind of shown how the labor movement was kind of breaking out of its stodgy, past and embracing new organizing in sectors that, traditionally had not really garnered that much support. So you saw Sean O'Brien actually standing with Starbucks workers, and talking about, the standing of baristas was the standing of any other worker who is fighting for dignity and respect on the job. So to see him again play into these divisions and is really disappointing. And I think it also gets to something that the labor movement, on a more hopeful note, needs to take on. We need to talk to our co-workers. If you are in elected union office, you need to go and talk to those pro-Trump members and have those conversations and take seriously the question of political education in the labor movement. Because what Sean O'Brien is playing with is he's using populist verbiage, dripping in resentment, and weaponizing that to undermine the very labor movement ranks of which he comes out of. So I think we need to be a lot more attentive to what we're doing in the labor movement in terms of those members that are persuaded by these arguments, that are persuaded by these kinds of divisive ploys, so that we could prevent like a Sean O'Brien from wielding this influence within our labor movement. So I think it's sobering, to acknowledge that, because I can go on forever decrying what I think Sean O'Brien is doing, but at the end of the day, I'm not a Teamster rank and file member. What I say doesn't really matter in the larger scheme of what's happening in the union. So I think we have to be able to build a different kind of movement. The labor movement, LaborNotes has long said, as a tagline, that putting back the movement in the labor movement. right now we are not acting as a movement. What Sean O'Brien is demonstrating is that the Teamsters are not part of the larger labor movement. I haven't really, correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't really seen him, come out, in support of federal workers who are right now on the chopping block. Like we haven't seen that. So I think it's dangerous to regress to a movement of sectional interest where my union is here, Teamsters are elevated up here, and baristas are at the bottom. Like we broke through some of those hierarchies within our own movement, and that's what's really scary about what Sean O'Brien is doing. That despite everything you and I have talked about today, this man is very likely going to be reelected in 2026. So it means we have a lot of work to do to build a movement that actually lives up to the aspirations of, building a mighty working class.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, he has not supported federal workers in any meaningful way, or even in any non-meaningful way, frankly. He had Vivek Ramaswamy on his podcast in part to talk about Doge. Vivek Ramaswamy, one of the architects of the anti-worker Doge projects, fired thousands of federal employees, forced out tens of thousands more. And instead of talking to a worker that this happened to, instead of talking to a worker that is fighting back against that, instead of talking to a union officer or president like Reverend Everett Kelly of AFGE, or Matt Biggs of IFPTE, or Randy Irwin in FFE, he talked to the boss about this project. And, I think that says just about everything, it says just about everything that you need to know. Luis Leon, assistant editor at LaborNotes, columnist for In These Times. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for your work.
Thanks for having me, Jacob.
That's going to be it for us today, folks. Appreciate everybody tuning in. TVLR.fm is the website. Leave us a voicemail at 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. And you can leave us a note at tvlr.fm/contact. We'll see you next week.